Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being on time. We're so happy to have you. Thank you for making the time to fellowship with us at CPJ today. This room is filled and will be filled throughout the day with just powerhouse faith-based leaders, yourself, and many others from across the country. My name is Yasmin Arrington, aka Yazzie Speaks. I have had the humbling privilege of serving as the 2022 Juvenile Justice Fellow here at CPJ, and I'm also the founder and executive director of Scholarships, Inc., which is a DC-based 501c3 whose mission is to provide college scholarships, mentoring, mental health supports, and a robust support network for college-bound young adults who have incarcerated parents, inspiring them to complete their college education. At this time, I am honored to introduce to you our CEO, who will come and welcome us and give us the occasion and the charge for today's convening in our time together. Stephanie Summers is the CEO of the Center for Public Justice, aka CPJ. She also serves as a trustee of Eastern University, where she received her MS in nonprofit management and is a recipient of the inaugural Duke Divinity Reflective Leadership Award. I would also like to personally add that Stephanie is a gifted intercessor, and she is a poet. So thus her prayers are very poetic. Stephanie is an excellent leader who is passionate about building up other leaders, reforming injustice systems, making a way for young people to have better opportunities, and her beautiful family and traveling. Without further ado, I'm now turning the program over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thanks to each of you for taking the time to be part of this conversation today. As we're getting started, would you go ahead and put your name and your organization and where you're joining from today in the chat? I want you to have the experience that we've been having as the registrations have been coming in, of seeing how there are leaders from all over the country who are coming together for this conversation. That's really exciting. I also want to start by thanking Yasmin, particularly for her leadership for today's event. She's been part of our team as the Juvenile Justice Fellow for 3 of these convenings now. And as this work has grown and we have added to the community of practice that is being formed, she has also continued her work as the very talented executive director for Scholarships. She's a gifted facilitator and she's going to do a fabulous job today, but I just want you to know she's also a tremendous ED for that organization, a woman of vision and incredible gifts. So thank you, Yasmin, for your work. Just going to add another welcome for folks who just joined us. If you haven't had a chance already, if you would just put your name, your organization, and where you're joining from today in the chat, that'd be great. We really want you to have the experience we had of seeing people from all over the country who are registering for this event as we're building this community of practice together. So I'm going to say a few words about the redemptive path forward that we're going to discuss today and why the Center for Public Justice is invested in convening this conversation. So the mission of the Center for Public Justice is to equip citizens, develop leaders, and shape policy to serve God, advance justice, and transform public life. We're not partisan and we're distinctively Christian. And we work specifically on shaping government and civil society's response to big societal challenges, enlisting the power of faith-based organizations to be part of the solution. Today's convening is born out of 2 sets of experiences, some organizational and some personal. So I'm going to start with the personal. I was a young person who was diverted from the juvenile justice system, specifically one of the worst juvenile justice systems in the country in my home state of Pennsylvania. And over time, as I gained leadership, I learned more about the factors that led to my being diverted and ultimately getting the help that I needed, which, by the way, was provided by faith-based organizations. The reality of my story is that I was diverted from the juvenile justice system because I was white, wealthy, and from the suburbs. And I didn't just have airbags that deployed when I crashed my life as a teenager. I had a life that was wrapped up in bubble wrap that I didn't even know was there when I encountered the system. In my first job out of college, I served as the executive director of a church-based urban youth center in the city of Pittsburgh, which is my hometown. And the experience with the juvenile justice system for the kids and families I served was not the same as my experience. Kids got sucked into the system, often for school-based incidents. And it was the type of low-level stuff that at our youth center, we wouldn't even put a kid out for because we knew they needed the support that was being provided by our work at the Open Door. And we knew that the lesson to be learned by the kid and maybe their family was about doing better in the future and learning the skills to be on a more restorative path. So during my season as an executive director, I also learned the power of faith-based organizations' engagement with the juvenile justice system, where things as simple as me writing a letter on a child's behalf meant the difference between that kid getting locked up or that kid being restored to community. So now the organizational experiences that drive us to this conversation. The Center for Public Justice has written about and worked on juvenile justice advocacy and reforms over the past several years. And all along the way, we've been asking, what is upstream from kids getting locked up that could really make a difference? And along the way, we've convened a growing community of practice to share tools and resources like the promising practice of credible messenger mentoring and much needed reforms to juvenile probation. And yet we've kept asking ourselves, what can be done that can stop the supply of kids to the juvenile justice system? Kids who need support rather than probation, kids who need help rather than getting locked up. And we've landed on diversion, the practice of kids literally getting diverted from the juvenile justice system, as another promising practice with a lot of ways that faith-based organizations and government can work together to bring about needed reforms. So we are grateful for you joining this growing community of practice for our third convening. Some of you are back for the third time, and we're really glad. And some of you are here for the very first time, and you are very welcome. Before we're going to move forward into our agenda today, can you do one more thing in the chat as we're getting to know each other? Could you put one thing that you feel like you're bringing to this conversation today? And could you share one thing that you hope to gain from the conversation? One thing you bring, one thing you hope to gain. We'll just take a minute. All right. Thank you. For those of you that are, more on the poetic, slower processor side, keep it coming. And I'm going to turn it back over to Yasmin. But thank you again for being part of our conversation today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for sharing with us who CPJ is, the mission of the organization, and setting the stage for us, what the goal, what is really happening within society, within our cities and our states as it relates to young people who are directly impacted by the system, and what it is that we are seeking to help support and to do. And so on that note, as it relates to diversion, as it relates to working and serving young people and families, I am elated, I am honored to bring to the stage and to introduce to you Reverend Maurice Winley. Now, I'm just going to share a little snippet of his bio. It does not do the justice, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. So I just want to briefly share with you some about Reverend Maurice Winley, who is affectionately known by his community as Reverend Mo. He is the executive director of Living Redemption Youth Opportunity Hub, a long envisioned nonprofit initiative that launched in 2017 to serve the youth of Central and West Harlem. The Living Redemption Hub is strategically positioned to innovate and impact wholeness and life-changing transformation in the youth of Harlem, to drastically reduce and potentially eradicate recidivism and youth involvement in the criminal justice system, and ultimately cause emergent, revitalized communities through re-envisioned lives. Oh, the power of words, I love it. And Reverend Winley is a third generation minister who carries on his family legacy, and he serves as the associate pastor of Soul Saving Station, a community church that has been serving the children, youth, and families of Harlem, New York since 1942. So I introduce to some and present to others, Reverend Mo.
Grace and peace. Thank you so much, Yasmin, for that introduction, and to Stephanie and Ruben and Belinda, my family. Thank you for this privilege and opportunity. Just want to share, my work and everything. Just hearing that, it's amazing. Because like you shared, Stephanie, I come from a background, again, grew up in a Christian home, third grade, private school, but enrolled in Street University and learned some very painful, and I'm talking about Street University cum laude, and really experienced some things very intensely. But I know the power of redemption, and my assignment is to encourage us that are laboring in this space of alternatives to incarceration for youth. And so that's why I said I bring hope. Many of you, we bring hope. We bring the evidence of transformation. We bring a roadmap. We bring a vaccination of truth, of love. And what I would say to you all, as a leader, Living Redemption, our mission is saving lives, healing communities, one relationship at a time. And we mean that. We don't speak about relationships from an anecdotal or superficial level. We understand that many of our young people who find themselves facing incarceration, and that's a travesty in and of itself, that we live in a society that would look at incarceration as an option to redirect youth, to transform youth. The very fact that we look at that. And so we see that love, brothers and sisters, and again, we're not talking anecdotal. What transformed me, what led me on a path when I was facing life in prison, after a lifestyle of being a violent predicate, it was love. It was the authentic love of God that was demonstrated to me. It was unconditional. And so when we talk about alternatives, the first thing, incarceration is not the answer. What the youth need is a demonstration of love. And so are we willing to demonstrate that love? And when we even talk about the systems, we all are offenders. We all are guilty. If we want to go even further, we all stand as criminals before a holy God. And so with that being said, we understand that God leads us. He led me to a change, a repentance through his kindness. And so here we talk about restorative, a demonstration of love, a demonstration of service. In the child, in that youth's moment of crisis, in that moment of pain, we can become a beacon of light and hope. And so let's turn to Isaiah 58. And again, I'm privileged, Living Redemption. It's been a tremendous journey, but the journey it's always about what's in it. It manifests outwardly. And I think a lot of times we miss that. We can get caught up in the externals, but the true source of transformation is God working in our inner man, in our brokenness, in our fault lines, God fortifying us. And as we are transparent and we take off our religious mask, we can affect profound generational transformation and change. And I'm speaking to us as faith-based leaders, because sometimes our religion can be an obstacle to someone receiving that love we spoke about. But Isaiah 58 is a scripture, is a portion of scripture for me that is a mission statement. And I'm not going to be before you long because I know the time, but Isaiah 58, this passage, we see the prophet challenging Israel about first of all, there's three things I want to give you. First of all is intention. We have to be mindful of our intentions, why we do what we do. It's easy to forget the why. And here the prophet is exposing the superficial, the ritual nature of their religion in terms of that's what they're fasting, their Sabbath keeping. He's saying that it's superficial, it's not substantive, and this is why your prayers are not being heard. And so we first must come with our authentic selves. Be careful about becoming jaded when we're dealing with broken systems, sin-infested systems. It's going to take transformative grace. Where sin abounds, grace much more abounds. And it can become very daunting when you're dealing with broken systems and you see these systems of oppression and you can feel overwhelmed. And so he's challenging the people here in this text. He's reminding them of their intention. And just again, being brief, he gives promise when we get our intentions in alignment, when we become truly worshiping God, this service, this act of this work that we're doing, advocacy, mentoring, laboring to save a lost generation, this work, it has to be pure. It has to come from a pure heart. It has to come from a clear conscience. And like I said, we can become contaminated because we're dealing with contaminated systems. Don't become what has hurt you. We say that all the time to the young people. And so we have to keep ourselves unspotted. We have to keep ourselves true. We have to maintain the path of love. I see evil, but I don't bow down to you. I don't do evil, but I don't bow to it either. And so don't objectify people. One of the things that we've seen has happened, we've seen the objectification of our youth, where they're looked at as stock and as a number and as a problem, not as a person, a youth, a being with tremendous potential. And so as we engage systems, please be mindful of that fact as you come across. Love conquers all, brothers and sisters. Let love be your greatest aim. What is true worship? True worship is loving God with the totality of our being. With the totality of our being. That is true worship. And then loving each other, loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. That's the fulfillment of the law. And so we live in a lawless society. We live in a loveless society. And so these are the challenges that we face. And again, love is the fulfillment of law. Anywhere we see lawlessness, lovelessness, we see lawlessness. And like I said, never do evil and never bow to evil. Let's look at this passage, and because I'm just trying to give something. I'm very inspired, and I just have to flow how I'm led. But going into these verses, I'm going to read from 8, start at 8. And these are some of the blessings that God promises. Your light shall break forth like the morning. Your healing shall spring forth speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. What do we have to do? Take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and speaking wickedness. We cannot condemn this generation. This generation must be lifted in love. Extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul. One of the greatest causes of when we see affliction is alienation from God, separation from God. And again, a God who is love. And when we're able to demonstrate that through our mentorship, through our holistic services, opportunities, supports that we wrap around youth and communities as we are demonstrating love, engaging sometimes hostile, contrary systems and paradigms, we come back to this. We have to extend ourselves. And like I said, with that intentionality, there must be integrity. There must be integrity. God will give us spiritual resistance. God will give us spiritual endurance. God will give us spiritual resilience as we follow his agenda. He says, your darkness will be as noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. And you will be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Those from among you shall build up old way places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, restorer of streets to dwell in. Now, credible messengers, for me being a credible messenger, we are embodying this truth from the waste places of our lives, from the rubble of our lives. We're using it as foundation material to build for a new generation, a new neighborhood, a new community, a new approach. And so be encouraged as laborers. Understand love is our tool. Love is our greatest power. Love conquers all. It's not anecdotal. It has to be demonstrated. It's sacrificial. When reaching these young people, to me, that's what the people say, what are you doing? Saving lives, healing communities, one relationship at a time. When we meet that young person, we are inoculating them with God's love. It's demonstrated through acts of service. It's demonstrated through mentoring. And we're seeing evidence of its effects. 68% of the youth participating in these programs have not reoffended. So we know it works from an empirical standpoint. But again, this text, like I said, we have to be intentional, brothers and sisters. We have to have integrity. I'm reminded of Daniel operating in Babylon in a contrary system, a minority. We are a minority. But yet it was his excellence, it was his integrity, and it was his wisdom, the wisdom that God gives us that we can draw from these broken places, the wisdom of how to overcome guilt and shame and stigma and how to move forward. We're talking about unleashing the power of transformation driven by the power of the love of God. Transformation that can change the trajectory of generations. And this scripture talks about that. This is the impact we see here, restoring streets to dwell in. It's not just an individual impact. It starts with an individual. It's one relationship at a time, but then it extends to the relationships, to the community. It radiates. And so this is viral. This is the love of God needs to be viral. Sin is viral. Sin is our chief issue. It separates us from God's love. It's why we are divided. It's why we are blinded. And we need to open our eyes. And like I said, part of our task is, even in this field of public service, don't lose sight of the inner man. Don't lose sight that you're reconnecting this soul to their creator. That's very important, because it's very easy to get caught up in the practical, and I'm talking from experience. And I'm at a major inflection point, because I'm looking at why we're not seeing the results that we could see. And it's because we have really, again, this is not the fast. We're right here. We could easily become known for what we don't do. And that's also what God was getting at here. You're not fasting. Fasting means you're not eating food. Sabbath, that means you're not working. Yeah, you're known for what you're not doing, but I want you to now be known and defined by what you do. And this is where we need to be intentional. This is where we need to operate with integrity, and we will see impact. I think our time is at a close. I just want to read this portion to you in a different way to encourage you. And this is the same message out of Isaiah 58, but I just want to read that same portion. Just read it silent to yourself. A full life in the emptiest of places. If you get rid of unfair practices, quit blaming victims, quit gossiping about other people's sins. If you are generous with the hungry, and start giving yourselves to the down and out, your lives will begin to glow in the darkness. Your shadowed lives will be bathed in sunlight. We're saying this as a prayer. I will always show you where to go. I'll give you a full life in the emptiest of places. Firm muscles, strong bones. You will be a well-watered garden, a gurgling spring that never runs dry. You'll use the old rubble of past lives to build anew. Rebuild the foundations from out of your past. You'll be known as those who can fix anything. Restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate, and make the community livable again. Father, I thank you for this privilege. I thank you for those that have convened on this line. We thank you for this movement. Father, as we've heard your word, make this a reality in our lives. God, help us to be intentional about demonstrating your love, God, because love, wherever there is a lack of love, there's lawlessness. And so, God, we live in a lawless society all around us. Let us shine bright. God, give us the ability to persevere, to have resiliency as we take on this work of diverting youth from incarceration. God, help us to see ourselves as part of the problem, but also to see ourselves as the cure. God, help us to be intentional. Help us to operate in integrity, transparency, introspection. God, help us to keep ourselves unspotted as we do this work. Help us to always propel the mission over money. God, help us to have convictions for truth and to always hold to true north. And God, let us have an impact. God, is taking generations to see this type of devastation. It's going to take generations to shift it, God. God, give us generational vision. And God, we thank you for this, Gary. Be with us during this time. Strengthen us, speak to us. In Jesus' mighty name I pray, amen. God bless you.
Amen. Amen. Yes. Woo! I feel it. I feel it. I feel it. I'm sure you feel the spirit. Thank you so much, Reverend Mo. Thank you for just moving, flowing with the spirit, for being obedient, for your sacrifice of love and showing up, because, you know, I know that each and every one of you on the line, you know, you've got full lives. abundant lives, and to whom much is given, much is required. So I really appreciate you all taking out the time. Now, that was the opening, okay? That felt like the benediction to me, but there's more in store. So, intentionality and integrity, being intentional, remembering the why. That was so rich. Thank you, Reverend Mo. That was so rich. Mission over money. I mean, come on with the confirmations. Yes. So let me just preface you all. If you hear a little bit of the DC coming out of me, and a little bit of the, the Baptist, just forgive me, love on your sister. I'm just excited. I'm excited. So next, we're going to have our first panel, and then we will have a break. So if you can, stay tuned with us. We'd love to have you as we continue along this journey and this fellowship and our time together, edifying and encouraging, uplifting one another, learning and hearing true testimonies of redemption, of God's love, of restoration, restoring young people and families, generational vision. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, y'all. Come on, say Yasmin, stay focused, okay? So I am elated to introduce to you each of our esteemed panelists for this morning. All of our speakers and panelists today are who I call heavyweight champions in the heavenly realms and also in our world today. My brief introductions do not fully capture all of their lived and their rich and complex life experiences, accomplishments, and essence, but they are just enough to whet our palates with anticipation. So please make sure to read their bios and each other's bios once the bio sheet becomes available. If you have any questions for any of our panelists or speakers, please feel free. We encourage you to put your questions, comments in the chat. You're welcome to engage with us in that way. And when you put your questions in the chat, we'll do our best to circle back towards the end of the panel to answer your questions. So the theme of this panel is youth diversion work in collaboration with faith-based organizations, leaders, and churches. Our esteemed panelists, if we could bring them up on the screen so you all can see them, are Reverend Ruben Austria, Pastor Monique Riley, and Mr. Aquil Crooks. And I'll just briefly introduce each of them, and we're going to jump into it. We're going to get into it. Reverend Ruben Austria is the founding executive director of Community Connections for Youth, or CCFY, based in the Bronx, New York. Seeing the need to equip more grassroots faith and community-based organizations to develop effective alternatives to incarceration, he launched CCFY in the fall of 2008. As a 2007 Soros Justice Fellow with the W. Haywood Burns Institute, Reverend Austria advocated for the redirection of funds from incarceration to community-based alternatives for youth. Friends, Ruben has a great spirit and he has a passion for all of God's people. He's a deep thinker and he's a powerful storyteller and very engaging storyteller. Ruben, from my perspective, is one of the sons of the Credible Messenger movement, and he is one of the most supportive advocates you will ever meet. Pastor Monique Riley is the founder of Freedom Youth Family Justice Center Incorporated, where she works directly with the victims of survivors of sex trafficking and domestic violence. Monique provides comprehensive supportive services and established peer education programs. Monique is a newly ordained pastor who is passionate about sharing the word of God with everyone she meets. She is also passionate about education and the arts. You all, Monique is a courageous spirit. When you hear her testimony, it will bring tears to your eyes. She is the embodiment of God's grace for his children and for the least of these in her own life and to so many youth. And certainly not least, Mr. Aquil Crooks is the program director at Street Safe Bridgeport in Bridgeport, Connecticut, under the umbrella of RIASAP, which is the Regional Youth Adult Social Action Partnership. And he is also the program supervisor of the Juvenile Review Board, aka JRB. Aquil is a directly impacted individual who has been incarcerated and whose father was also incarcerated. Aquil had an epiphany about the path he was headed on and that he wanted different for his own life and family members who depend on him. He now leads and supports and works alongside the CEO, Ebony Epps, the credible messengers of the Street Safe Bridgeport program, and also system involved and directly impacted youth. Some of their work includes violence intervention and prevention and meeting families in the hospitals after a youth was fatally shot or injured, and ministering to and comforting the families and encouraging them to get involved with Street Safe Bridgeport. Aquil is very energetic and passionate about serving and helping his community, and he's an old soul. Welcome, welcome, Monique Aquil Ruben. Welcome.
Nice having me. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for making time. It's really amazing to have you all here in the same room. So let's jump right in, you all. Would you kindly share your story and why you founded your organization and or do the work that you do? Definitely make sure once again to mention the state and the city you're located in and where you do your work. Ruben, could you do us the honors and introduce yourself, your story?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Yasmin, and thank you, Stephanie, and all the folks at CPJ. So glad to be with you. I think when I first met you all, I told you, I wish I'd met you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because it's the type of network that I always imagined and often couldn't find. But my story is that I started Community Connections for Youth, which is in the South Bronx, New York, really to confront two major injustices as I saw them. And the first is just the incredible racial disparities that we see in the juvenile justice system in New York City, where 92% of youth arrests, 95% of detention admissions, 98% of state placements, and 99% of the average daily population are youth of color. And seeing how the young people who are getting locked up, who are getting sent upstate, with an enormous price tag on them, right? In some cases, almost $1 million per youth per year, with all of that money going upstate to support youth prisons in counties that often didn't send their own youth to the system, but depended economically on having Black and brown bodies in cages to keep their communities economically viable. And so that was the first injustice, and had the privilege of spending a lot of time getting to organize communities, faith leaders around trying to get that system shut down, trying to get youth prisons closed in upstate New York. But then the second part, the more important part, was to get the funds reinvested into grassroots community alternatives. The campaign to get youth prisons closed was very successful. We got more than 2/3 of the prisons in upstate New York closed, freeing up millions and millions of dollars. But the funds were never making it down to the grassroots, right? So to people like Monique, to people like Aquil, to people like Reverend Winley, often the monies that would be saved, they would get redistributed sometimes to social services, sometimes to residential, kind of kinder, gentler facilities, but not down to the grassroots, right? Not down to the same community leaders in the neighborhoods that were the most impacted, that were affected. And so started CCFY really to demonstrate that no, the grassroots really can do this work, deserves the work, deserves the reinvestment to work with young people. So today in the Bronx, we work directly with young people who have cases, who've been arrested, and try as much as possible to get them out of the system before even before their case even gets to court. Or if it gets to court, really trying to get them removed from the system as early as possible and plugged into a network of grassroots faith and neighborhood organizations. Monique's organization is joining our collaborative, and we're looking forward to doing more work with them. Amazing leadership from that group. And we do that just at home in our own neighborhood. But the second part of what we do is seek to facilitate that process in other places where system leaders with a conscience and a vision are saying, we want to get money out of our systems, out of prisons, out of this kind of punitive technology, and reinvest it into the communities that really can do the most with it. And so that's Community Connections for Youth, and I wanted to be here with you all.
Thank you, Ruben. Aquil?
Good morning, everyone. As you stated, my name is Aquil, and what brought me here to this work is, I would just say, my life. Background on my life. I was the typical kid who you would see in a juvenile facility, whose life should have ended in a state facility. Both of my parents actually were convicted murderers. And throughout my life, I tend to follow some of their footsteps and living a life in the urban community. My mother actually she did her crime as a juvenile, so she had different circumstances. So she actually had me on a furlough while serving her time. So after that, growing up, she was a young teen mom, so she gave the best that she could. And we lived in the at the Start and Father Panic Village, which was a notorious I call it a brain fart, projects in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And drugs were in and out of my household. There was shooting outside my household, that it was just known for that. And although that some would be deterred from that lifestyle, I ended up joining that lifestyle and caught myself on $1 million bond and arrested for racketeering and organized crime, and end up serving 3.5 years in prison. When I came home from prison, I actually decided, my uncle, who also was, in and out of prison all throughout my life, he was like, hey, come with me to this program. And I'm like, listen, I'm on a bracelet. I got 2 hours left. The program 6 to 8. I can't. The program 6 to 8. I got to be in the house at 9. There's no way that I'm taking those 2 hours and going to a program. But I satisfied his needs and I went. And then after I went once, I went twice. And then I started going every week. And throughout the process, I started to realize that I was okay with going in and out of jail for the rest of my life. And I noticed that that was not okay. And while I was going through that, the program actually hooked me up with another program who hired me to work at that program. And since then, I now supervise 2 of the programs that I used to work at. I've gotten my bachelor's degree. I've been pardoned. And now I'm giving back to the community and these kids who something that I wasn't able to receive. Because I know what it feels like to have a positive role model. I know what it feels like for the people above you not to understand you or not hear what you have to say. And I'm not saying that they're saying the same thing that I'm saying, but I know that they want to be heard. I understand the feeling of not being heard. And that's why I do what I do.
Aquil, thank you. Yes, Monique.
Yeah, thank you so much again to CPJ and to you, Yasmin, for having me again today here. So Freedom Youth got started in 2019, and it was founded off of my story. I, as a young person at 12 years old, was a survivor of sex trafficking. It is something that happened to me. It continues to happen to many young people today. And I vow to never hold my story anymore, never be ashamed of it, but to share my truth and to shed that to whom all can hear. And I think from me just going out and telling my story, I ran into so many other young people. It'll be after a workshop and it's like, this happened to me. This is happening to me. This is happening to my mom. So we started a program, started off with just mentorship and providing them with, my story and asking them, teaching them ways that I have been able to heal and, things of that nature. And then it took off from there. I always say, God, he works miracles. He's able to transform people and transform lives. He transformed minds. And so I give back to the community by providing, comprehensive supportive services to families, to youth and young people, as well as to adults who are going through human trafficking and domestic violence. Some ask me, well, why did you go into domestic violence? A lot of victims, a lot of survivors find themselves who have been involved in sex trafficking or some form of trafficking have also been involved in domestic violence. So we opened it up to domestic violence. We started with youth and opened it up to adults. We stopped at adults and then opened it up to families because I know personally from my own story that it starts with the family. There were a lot of red flags in my life. When I was 12 years old, there was a lot of beating happening in the home, not by my mom, but by an angry sister. We were in and out the shelter system. We were, in need of food. It was just a lot going on personally, a lot of red flags, a lot of screening issues that probably no one else saw, and then I go to school and I'm being bullied and there was issues happening there. And so where do a 12-year-old turn to? They turn to the one person they feel that they can connect with. And sometimes that's our youth. Sometimes it's their peers. And for me, it was a 13-year-old who got me involved in sex trafficking. It took her about 3 months to do so. And it felt like it was about a lifetime to get out of it. That's what it felt like. And I think out from my story, I'm able to share and shed my truth with young people and to be able to help them understand that, it's not your fault. And sometimes we do make premature decisions as a child, but it don't have to last you a lifetime to heal from it. So it's kind of where we started with everything. So now we're just offering empowerment. We're helping victims and survivors by strengthening them, stabilizing them, and then making sure that they are able to rebuild their lives. We start that really by actually starting with the home. When a person come back from being trafficked, the first immediate thing is the parents believe that that child is the same child that left the home that morning before that incident happened to them. And it's not. You have a whole different person that you now have to become accustomed with. And so my family did not know how to handle what was happening to me. And so, they just didn't know how to deal with the trauma that I have gone through. And so we today go into the houses. We are speaking with parents, we're speaking with the young people, we're educating, providing advocacy in order to be able to really sustain the children and the youth and adults that we work with.
Could you talk a little bit about the ways in which your organization diverts youth from the courts, probation, juvenile detention, and helps set them on a track for kind of upward mobility, restoration, and success in their communities?
Sure. We have the privilege of being kind of positioned right in the Bronx Family Court, have an office there, but are trying to meet young people and families really as soon as they touch the system at all. What a lot of people don't realize is that in New York and a lot of other places, the Department of Probation or some other entity that's doing family court intake can actually divert young people before they go before a judge, before they go to the prosecutor's office. And so what we try to do as much as possible, if we're not, even sometimes getting to youth at the precinct, but when they go through that probation intake, there's something that New York City probation can do that's called an adjustment, which is usually a 60 to 120 day window of time where they'll tell the young person, don't get in trouble for the next 60 or 120 days. They might have to come back and see their probation officer a couple times, and then usually do some kind of community program. And if they get sent to us and the report back is like, yeah, they're good, they're showing up, they're connecting, then basically their case is sealed. and it's no longer on the record. And so what we have the privilege of having is we have 3 staff who are on rotation in family court. I know one of our parent coaches, Demetria Frampton, is on, our lead parent coach, but they're in the family court 5 days a week. And just trying to meet young people and families as soon as they come in that front door, and then basically saying, hey, if you're being given the opportunity to do something other than go through the system, do you want to come to our program? Often the answer is yes. If not, sometimes we have to chase them down and get them to engage with us. But that's often where we try to get young people. And once we get them, the process is always a twofold process of working with the family and the young person at the same time. So we have our staff who work with youth, who will engage the young person, just try to figure out what they're into, what makes them tick, what would they want to do other than be on the streets. And then also at the same time, a parent coach who's working with the family, because we see a lot of cases where there's family conflict, and that often is kind of driving some of the behavior. And then for us, what it is introducing the young person to a bunch of different options in the neighborhood, right? So programs like Monique's or other programs that do art, community gardening, youth leadership, usually run by credible messengers, usually either started by somebody like Aquil or Reverend Mo, or have mentors like that on site who are really good at engaging young people. And really just telling the young person, listen, for the next few weeks, your job is just to show up to this program. And often when we meet young people, they're sort of, going, what's the bare minimum that I have to do in order to get free of my case? And we're telling them, look, it's not that difficult, just show up once a week, just don't get in trouble. But our goal really is much deeper than that, is to get them connected to those programs in the neighborhood that are like, yeah, there's no exit date for our program, right? Like, yeah, you might have an exit date for your mandated court involvement, but then we really want to tap in to inspire you, to get you connected to who you are, to your gifting. And our data shows that a lot of young people, if they're mandated to us for like 60 days, they're staying involved with this network for longer than a year. Hopefully it gets to the place, as has happened with us, where once they complete the program, they start serving as a peer mentor, as a volunteer. And then sometimes we actually hire our young people and hire parents who've been through them to kind of reach the next generation. But it's really about being present in court or in relationship with the system partners at the time that a young person is kind of is right in that early decision-making stage, and then trying to get them connected to as much community support as possible. Really stay on top of them for that short term while they have that open case, because they are under the microscope. And during the time that they have that open case, as a lot of people will know, anything and everything they do is going to be scrutinized. So a lot of the teenage behavior that all of us do, missing school, truancy, curfew violations, all that stuff becomes looked at as a reason to keep that young person in the system. So we really try to stay on top of them during those 2 to 6 months, whatever it is that the case is open. But then hopefully by that time, really keeping them voluntarily connected to people in the neighborhood who will support them.
Thank you all. I'm so sorry for that. When you're doing the right thing, there's always forces that try to work against you. But we're here. We're gonna keep it rolling. Thank you so much, Ruben, and thank you, CPJ team, for holding it down. Monique and/or Aquil, would you like to pick up and share what are some of the ways in which the youth that you work with learn about your organization, how they come to you, how you the various ways you divert youth from the courts and the system and into your organization?
So I'll guess I'll go next. Sorry, Monique. So for one organization is JRB, Juvenile Review Board. Our referrals from JRB come in through either 1, the court system, 2, SROs, 3, the school. But in order for us to go through the school, it's another organization called the Youth Borough Service, YSB. and it would have, the referral would have to go through there to go to then to JRB. And then from there we handle we use restorative practice and handle restorative circles and pianos to kind of support the person in whatever they did that was incorrect or that led them down the path, so that they don't go and lead to a life that leads to the next program, which is Street Safe. And with Street Safe, unfortunately, most of our referrals are from probation when something has happened. I mean, some are from probation when something has happened already. Some unfortunately come once they're a victim of gun violence. When we go to the hospital and respond to the hospitals, we do interact with them, reach out to them and offer them services. Some do take up those services, some don't. And then we also get referrals from referrals. So we have people who hear about the program and they just want help for their son, nephew, brother, whoever, and they know that the work that we do is just I don't even have a word for it, because we're able to be there for these kids at 2 or 3 in the morning, where most programs aren't there. When mom and him are not, they're no longer speaking, or he's kicked out at 3 in the morning, he has nowhere to go. We're not saying that we're going to provide a hotel, but he's going to have somewhere to go if we got to open up the office and sit in there with him all night. But there's never a time or a solution. We're not going to try to figure it out. And funding does come in an issue sometimes, but we navigate around that. We reach out to our resources because we feel that these kids, unfortunately, they're already let down by the school systems. They're let down they're at home going through whatever situation they're going through, and they need some kind of stability. They need someone to be there, and that is our goal and purpose.
And Monique?
Yes. So with us, we are actually under our YAD program. We kind of meet students where they are. So we follow like a harm reduction type of, style, where we meet them where they are. If that's like in school, we kind of like are invited to workshops, as I mentioned earlier. We go into the schools, we're able to meet there. At the end, it's either referral to, or a person comes up to me after and say, that's my story, that happened to me, I have a friend. And then that's one way that we are able to get some of the youth to come in. I personally, in the nighttime, different times of the day, work the tracks, where we can find young survivors as young as 12 years old. Sometimes that means going back into the lifestyle just a little bit to save one. And so I work alongside NYPD sometimes, and mostly Homeland Security. We act as a liaison for them, as well as an aftercare service for them. So after they, find a person, rescue a person, that person is then referred to us. Once we get them, we provide case management, supportive services. We go into the home, kind of help manage any issues in the home, through peer mediation or mediation with the parent and child. We do a lot of activities with them. I think that for teens specifically, they are looking for an outlet, most of them. Sometimes they find an outlet or a plug that's not the best for them. Maybe that's a young person who gets them involved in a lifestyle, is somebody else, or maybe that young person just doesn't have the self-esteem level that they need, that I can definitely identify with. And I think that, once we do all of the hard stuff, I think it's then time to start attaching them, or finding out what their passions are. And connecting them to places and people, just as Ruben said, connecting them to places and people that is, that's their heartbeat. Some of our teens want to be rappers, they want to be singers, they want to be dancers. I knew I wanted to be a dancer. And just being able to connect them with the community, keep them involved. We do a lot of paid internships. So once they come through the program, we then want to be able to act as a source for them. And the reason why is because a lot of our young people who are involved in sex trafficking specifically, they're doing it for the money. Sometimes they get the money, sometimes it goes to the pimp buys them hair, nails, shoes, clothing, etc. And that's what they continue to go back towards, or for some, not all. So we act as giving them some kind of funding source, $200 every week or something like that, in order to suffice them. But these young people are making anywhere from like 3,000, 4,000 a night, for every person that they have had to deal with for the night. And so sometimes bringing those who can work, 17 and 18-year-olds who can go out there and work, bringing them back to a regular McDonald's jobs or something like that is not going to suffice them. And so that's been our hard struggle. How do we, create and generate funding for these individuals that come back out the lifestyle in order to keep them out of the lifestyle? Are there programs that allow survivors of sex trafficking to enter housing, et cetera, long-term, not short-term, not going through the regular channels of the shelter system, but they need real, how do you say it? They need real things in order to keep them at bay. And so that's some ways that we have been able to support. Alongside that, we also work with those who may be at risk, and we call at risk anybody who lives in the community where there's sex trafficking or where there is pimps, hotels in the communities. There's a lot of that happening now in New York City. And so they're living in red zones and not knowing that this is a specific place where prostitution takes place. And so we are, partnering up with different community-based organizations to be able to provide longstanding, programs and things like that for them. So that's some ways that we have been able to, divert some of the young people, just bringing them in, showing them different things. It's all about building relationships with the kids. You have to have people with lived experience who have gone through things, who have seen this before in order to really get to the core of these young people, and specifically in the realm and where I'm working. If you have never been in their shoes, they don't have a sense of respect for you. You know what I mean? But if you put people in the room who have lived experience, who overcame it, and that's walking, in a different light, then they can see something new. If you take them out of their community and take them to a different state, someplace they've never been to, put them in a nice hotel just for the weekend and learn about different workshops, giving them incentives at the same time, it helps. And so, just as the other young man had just stated, funding is an issue. It's a big issue for organizations that really want to do the work, that really have the experience and, that know what that particular group needs. So that's it.
So much, Monique. Thank you, each of you, for just taking the time to explain and break down to us how you learn about you. Yeah, wow, absolutely. Yes, Demetria. Wow. Yeah, it's really humbling. Some of the is disturbing. Some of the things that our young people have to deal with and are facing, and sometimes don't even realize what it is that's being done to them and what they're going, what it is that they're being forced into or coerced into, and just shifting gears a little bit. I'd love to, since we're talking about how, and let me just say this too, before I get into that. Thank you all for your transparency and for sharing your stories. I'm very careful. This is not an exploitive platform, but it is to amplify your stories and your voices. And I'm very big on that. But I also appreciate you being honest about the fact that small community, I won't say small, grassroots, community bred organizations with leaders that have lived experiences often suffer or struggle with having the funding and resources, right? Because even philanthropy is a system, right? Philanthropy is a system in and of itself. And you have to have, you either have to learn it yourself, but you have to have a certain type of knowledge and skill set, right? Donor cultivation. We don't know things about major gifts and planned giving. We don't have development directors and all these kinds of things that you're supposed to have that you need so you can write the grants, so you can write. And so anyway, I digress. So let's talk about how your organizations over the years have partnered with faith-based organizations, community leaders, churches, and in your work, some of the ways in which you are doing that, but also some of the ways in which maybe it could be done more, from community-based, faith-based leaders and churches and the like within your community. So I'm gonna switch up the order a little bit. Actually, pardon me, Monique, if you don't mind starting with you, how does your organization partner with faith-based organizations, faith-based leaders and or churches in your work currently, and or how would you like to, well, actually let me just stop there because we have a follow-up question. So
So yes, thank you, Ms. Yasmin. So yeah, we have worked with churches to be able to educate and share awareness around, sex trafficking specifically. Sometimes they invite us in for domestic violence, but more so around the sex trafficking. A lot of people are not aware of how it's happening in their community. Most people believe that it is just abduction. That's the first thing that come to mind. Abduction. It's not. I went home every day when it was happening to me until I was taken out of my mom's home. And so being able to educate them on the different forms. Right now, we're in October, it's sacrificial trafficking month. Nobody knows about that. They take a lot more young boys during this time and use them for witchcraft and different things and drinking of the blood, etc. Ways that we have also worked with them is being able to come in and do workshops for their young people. Just maybe sometimes it's too rough, it's too tough for the young people. So giving presentations on just resilience, what it looks like to overcome, using scripture, etc., to be able to lead the way in the storytelling of what did other people overcome in the Bible, what did they do, how did they take, how did they look at their circumstance, how did they leave, how did they get out of their circumstance, what did they learn. So just being able to come in and educate, also we have a Color Me advocacy program. And so during the summer months, we have an intensive program where the kids come in and learn how to advocate. So we go into the churches, we'll teach their kids how to advocate for themselves. It don't just have to be about human trafficking and domestic violence, any social issue. So we have them come in, they learn to do presentations. They are literally drafting up stuff. They're drafting up letters to legislators. They're sending it out to people like Senator Biaggi, et cetera. And so I think that has been really fun. And then also we have taken youth out to learn what it looks like to, put the power back in their voice. Like our voice is powerful. And so we should be using it at all times. We don't have to fight physically. We can use our voice. We can use education. And so taking them out to different places like protests in Washington, D.C. and Albany, getting big buses and going out there and participating in different protests has also been a way that we have been able to connect with the faith-based organizations. What I would like to see more is I would like to see more transparency in the church concerning these issues, because a lot of it is swept under the rug. And there are tons of creative ways to do that. It don't just always have to take place with us having these kind of panel discussions, but really, truly, rather it's a women's meet or it's a youth convention or something of that nature, just being able to expand and build more and not being so afraid to lend us the youth, lend us your youth ears, your children ears. A lot of parents are afraid to talk about human trafficking, but our children is what the pimps are looking for. If they can get them at 5, they would, and it costs more money. If they can get them at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is important to you. Should we keep, covering out our youth eyes and ears and saying, just go out there, only talking to them about sex education, but refusing to talk to them about how their peers can get them involved in sex trafficking, sex work, etc. So that's where I would stop.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you. Aquil, would you be willing to share? I know we've talked about this before, some of the partnerships that that Street Safe has initiated and continued with the local church and also in your advocacy efforts. Would you be willing to share about some of that?
Yes. So Street Safe, actually, we partner with a lot of our religious leaders and different faith-based organizations. We actually partner with an organization called Connect, which is a combination of different faith bases who worked on different policies. As one policy change that we did work on and were successful in happening in Connecticut is the automatic erasure, which means after a certain amount of time, a felony would, depending on the charge, lower grade felonies and misdemeanors would automatically be erased off your record. That was literally about, in this group, there had to be about over 100 members, 100 coalition members from different faith-based organizations, whether it's Islamic churches or Islamic mosques or Catholic churches or Protestant or Baptist. It was just amazing sight to see. We actually just also did a prayer, we hosted a citywide prayer at City Hall Annex in Bridgeport, Connecticut with Islamic faith-based and also the Christian faith-based. We also did a walk on each side of town in Bridgeport with both faith bases as well. We're heavily involved with any of the faith bases that are willing to work with us and willing to give back to the community members. Because one of the things that we all know is that the people that are in the community, whether it's the victims of the gun violence or the perpetrators, their family members are going to church. These are the people in the community. These are their grandkids. These are their nephews. These are these nieces. So it's important that we bring them back to here, because these are the people who they respect. And one of the things that I would love to see more of is for them to be out in the community more, for the church, the people of the churches and the mosques to come out and hit the ground running a little bit more, because as I previously stated, these are their children. These are their nephews. These are their nieces. These are the people who are closest to the problem, and they should be a part of fixing the problem or lending a hand to have someone else fix it. And it looks like we lost her again.
We noticed this time. We were so engrossed in what Monique was sharing that none of us noticed the first time. Thank you. Ruben, why don't you hop in here and talk a little bit about your partnerships with the faith-based organization?
Yeah, so it's part of our mission, right, to equip grassroots faith and neighborhood organizations to develop effective community-driven alternatives to incarceration for youth. I think ultimately the vision, the dream would be that every church looked like Reverend Winley's church, right, where you had the church proper with its services, its Bible studies, its worship, and you had 5 to 6 to 7 days a week of youth programming. And we know that that's kind of the ultimate hope. In a more practical way, what we dream of and desire still is that what we know is that the communities where the most young people are getting locked up, they might be food deserts, they might be service deserts, they might be business deserts. They're not church deserts, right? We probably have the highest density of churches in the same communities where young people are getting locked up the most. And we always think about this vision of what if each church in our community just took responsibility for one young person, for one family? And Aquil is absolutely right about that. Monique is right about that. When we were doing the research on the families, 50% of the family members of young people incarcerated said they belonged to a religious community. But a lot of them also said they were ashamed and afraid to tell their own religious community that their child was involved, right, because of the stigma. What we do, however, and have had success in is often going to churches and saying, we'd love for you to partner with us in engaging young people. And there's a few ways you could do that. One is to provide mentors for us, and especially those mentors who have the lived experience, who have experienced that transformation. Some churches, unfortunately, it'll be the person who doesn't really feel like they fit so much in the church ministry who will volunteer to do that. Other churches is a much more integrated thing where a church will actually say, I want to commission the mentoring ministry to be a ministry of the church. And it's just as much a ministry of the church if you are going out and mentoring kids in the justice system than if you are singing in the choir or you're doing the usher ministry or whatever else it is. And that's often a blessing when a church will kind of get a group of people participating. And then other churches will offer space, right? We'll say, hey, we don't necessarily have the people who are the best ones to engage these young people, but we do have space, and we're willing to offer that space to other folks who can engage young people and maybe don't have don't have a building to meet in. And then we have had churches. Often, I'll say it's more likely to be parachurches, right? It's often more likely to be the CDC, Community Development Corporation of a church, or kind of an affiliate ministry of a church that actually becomes our technical partner. Often, to be honest, a lot of times it is more the sort of faith-led, faith-inspired nonprofits that work more closely with us. and a lot of times I feel like giving up on the church sometimes, right? Because I'm like, you know, y'all, like Aquil said, right, y'all are too busy with your services, like Reverend Mo said, right, with the ceremony, right? You're too busy doing stuff in church to get out there and reach the people who are really hurting. But I still believe, right, that God is moving through the church. The church is not a building, right? It's not a collection of meetings. The church is the people. But I do believe that there is a role for more churches, more in the faith community to say, right, we are here. We are here. And I'll just share this real quick. I wanted to share this during the services. But when we think about the issues our young people are facing, the challenges, there's so much stuff, and people go, what's going to meet the need, right? But all the way back in 1999, they did a national survey of youth in detention and found that the two characteristics that delinquent youth have in common the most, and we always ask this in our trainings and always get the wrong answers. People are like, what is it? Drugs? Is it trauma? Is it, you know, poverty? The two characteristics that most delinquent youth share are lack of connection to caring adults and lack of involvement in positive structured activities. And so that's not to diminish the other needs that young people have in the specialized services, but I think, as you've heard over and over again, relationships, community, and what better place to provide that than the church. And so, yeah, so we work practically with churches in those ways, and we really hope, and it's part of the toolkit that you'll hear about, right, that just more people of faith, more faith leaders will just start going to court with young people. We'll start just asking how they can support. And like folks said, there, a lot of these young people are already in your churches. Even if the young person himself is not in your church, their family is, a grandmother is, an aunt is, often a mother. So yeah, we get frustrated with the church, but we also believe the church is the answer in a lot of ways.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please forgive me. There's some spiritual warfare going on. I'm gonna call it as it is. So my internet is going in and out. But so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna do this really fast. We've got 2 more questions. We're scheduled to have a break at 12:30, but we might get a few more extra minutes because this panel is just really sufficient and efficient. So the last 2 questions that we have for each of you is, one, what are some ways that you envision or would like to see, you know, your organization partnering with churches, faith-based organizations, and leaders that is not already happening, or maybe you want to see more of some of this work that is happening, whether it's advocacy, whether it's providing space, mentorship, right? So that's one. One is, what do you envision? What are ways that you envision partnering, or, you know, kind of like this reimagining? So, you know, how can we partner with the church, AKA the people, we as the church? And then the second question is, what are some ways, maybe you just give us 1, 2, or 3 ways that faith-based leaders, the folks on this call, and CPJ can support your work and get involved. So Ruben, if you could go first, and then we'll have Aquil, and then last but certainly not least, Monique.
Yeah, so I'll just come back again to that ultimate vision, right, of what if every church was just taking responsibility for the 1 or 2 kids on the block where they are, who are getting in trouble, going to court with them, supporting the family, and coming together, right, and just saying, how can we as the church be part of the network of people, and all people, right? I think, you know, sadly, sometimes in the tradition that I come from, people say, well, I don't know if we want to get involved in that if it's not our denomination, right? Or if it's not our specific theological construct. And I appreciate Brother Aquil talking about, in the communities that we're in, it often has to be groups of different faith traditions, right? The Islamic community, groups that don't necessarily subscribe to a faith, but everybody who is part of a community saying, how are we coming together to do our role in keeping kids out of cages? And we'd love to see that. Some of the specific ways that we would love to see groups partner with us, again, we're very neighborhood specific. So of course, any church in the South Bronx, any faith community in the South Bronx, we want to say, get with us, become a part of our collaborative, contribute whatever you can. On a broader level, and I think we'll talk a lot about this with this toolkit that we're very excited that we worked on with the Center for Public Justice, where, you know, in the past, we've sort of had this desire, ambition. Could every church start an alternative to incarceration ministry, right? Could every church have young people coming to them as a program? And that maybe is not necessarily the answer. Not everybody's called to that. But coming back to just the idea of going to court with young people. And we've created this toolkit in a lot of ways to equip and inspire faith leaders to go to court, to see what's going on in court, to walk alongside young people. And I promise you, if you start going to court with young people, if you start visiting them in detention, if you haven't done that already, I believe God is going to give you a burden and a heart for that, and to ask the question, how can I do more? For me, my call to ministry came at Rikers Island, just as a guest. Going to speak to some young people there, and then feeling like this is where I'm meeting Jesus more than I've ever met him in a church service. But we would encourage you to find out about how to go to court with young people. When you look at the toolkit, there are CCFY, Community Connections for Youth. We do specific trainings for faith communities on court advocacy, right? And how you can really accompany young people to court, stand in the gap for them, intercede for them. But yeah, we would just love to see the faith community kind of take a much more active role in saying, how can we be part of keeping kids out of cages? And I'll just say this, in the advocacy world too, right? And I've had secular friends who said to me, you know, when this legislation is coming up, right? When the question is coming about budgets, are we going to spend money on building prisons, or are we going to send them to youth programs? I've had friends say this, can you get clergy to come and stand on the steps of City Hall? Because we know that the politicians, if they see 100 protesters, they go, that's 100 votes. If they see 100 clergy, they multiply that number by 100, and suddenly they're counting 1,000 votes. And so when the faith community kind of stands up and says, we're concerned about justice, we're concerned about the individual young people, but we're concerned about the policies and the laws and the structures that are either moving young people towards the system or away from it, the powers that be do stand up and take notice. And so, you know, I like to joke, the only 2 times I wear my collar is in court, when I'm advocating for a young person, or at a protest. Not really into the church ceremony stuff, but again, we know clergy, people of faith, leaders have a tremendous role to play, not just in the individual service of young people, but in challenging those systemic injustices as well. So I would encourage that. Look for your local advocacy campaigns. Look who's working to close youth prisons. Look who's trying to create more alternatives, and just get alongside and say, how can we serve and support you? Churches don't have to lead that all the time, right? It's a real blessing, right, for a lot of programs when someone just says, hey, we just like to come and support. We had a church that said, hey, we don't have a lot to do. Can we come to your family gatherings? And we'd like to have a team of people that serve food. And the pastor did that. The senior pastor and his wife said, we'll come and serve food. And it was such a humble act that it really opened up a lot of relationships, and people not just going, oh, they're not coming here to just try to get us to come to their church. They're just coming here to serve. But in that, relationships being built and community being formed. So that's what I would encourage the church to do.
Thank you, Ruben. Aquil?
So for our organization, I'll start with the JRB side. When we do our panels and have our restorative circles, we are so short on people and people that want to attend. I think the church addition to its members would be amazing. We would be able to actually have and not be able to have different perspectives, and if people from different backgrounds be able to help these young adults get some of the knowledge and stuff that they need. On the street safe side, as Ruben mentioned, the church has people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, and to be able to tap into that and use that as mentorship to people. And prime example, we have a local church in our community. Not only does the church have people from different backgrounds, they have a lot of political figures that go to this church. They have a lot of political pull that would be able to see the things and programs that work for its community. What's the second part of the question, Henry?
Yes, so the second question is, what are some ways that faith-based leaders, particularly on this call, can support you in your work and or get involved?
I mean, like, share. We're on Street Safe we're on Street Safe Bridgeport on Facebook, Street Safe Bridgeport on Instagram. Share our message, share the things that we do. Reach out to your faith-based brothers and sister partner churches. Let them know that we are in existence, that we're here to work and give back to our communities. If there's people that does the same kind of work that works in your communities, be a bridge and a connection to let us link up and connect with them as well.
Thank you, Aquil. Monique?
So I would say I love the arts. You know, I've been a praise dancer, I've been a singer in the ministry, I've done all of it. I think bringing the arts to youth has always been a way to kind of help kids heal. And again, it links them back to their passion. But I also believe in providing space has always been an issue for us in the beginning when we first started. And I always tell this story because it's so needed. I remember us not having a place to go. We had about 25, youth in our house downstairs, cleared out everything in one day and was like, you know what, God, I don't got a place to do the work that you asked me to do. So this is where it will be done at. I came home, threw furniture out. My husband was like, what is going on? What is happening here? And I said, Joe, we don't have no place to do this at. And we've called, we've been looking, we've been here, we've been there. And I know that what we're doing is God's work. And we threw everything out, had good faith, brought a couple of tables, etc. And we had about 25 kids over the summer in our house downstairs, and it worked out perfectly. We cleaned out my room, moved it upstairs in my kids' room. And I was just like, God, this is not it, but it worked for the first year. Second year, God bless us, open doors. And people provided just space for us to meet, even if it was in a couple of hours in the afternoon. I think space is so needed when you're doing the work that we're all three of us are doing. We're working with the youth. They need private spaces where they can actually share their, their story with you. And so being able to bring the arts to them, having space is some ways that I think that faith-based organizations can assist us with. Volunteering your time with us, helping us build legislation. I mean, it's not only going to be for us, in one community, but it's for the youth to come. It's for generations and generations to come. And so I think creating legislation is important. On a business end, we can always use more board members to help us. Like I said, I'm a baby in this. I'm a baby pastor. I'm a baby in building this organization out, and I can use the help. And so joining our board, joining our task force, joining our outreach team, and just being able to, offer information. That's all I think for us.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you so much, Monique, Aquil, and Ruben. Deborah shared with me that there aren't any questions in the chat. Before we close out, I wanted to just open it up. Does anyone on the line have any questions? We've got about 4 minutes. Does anyone on the line have a question for either Monique, Aquil, Ruben, or all of the panelists? Or comments even?
Hey, good afternoon. I have a comment. I'm Joseph Riley. I'm also with Freedom Youth Family Justice Center. And I just want to say to everybody that's on the panel, even everybody that's on the call, just some inspiring words. The work that we do is very daunting. And we understand that it's more than just work. It's a mission. If we can get past the small things, as far as like, I know it's hard to say this. I know we all need funding. I know there's certain things that we need, but just understand that what we're doing is a mission from God. And it's not just a job, it's a duty, and it must get done. Things will open up. Things will happen. And great things have happened. I've seen great things. I've seen where we were called out and people didn't believe in what we did. They told us that we would only have 3 months to be in business, and we believed in ourselves. And now we're 4 years going, just doing the right thing, not undercutting people, not going far from our mission and vision. Just stay on the course, everybody. This needs to be done. Our youth is at stake, and they depend on more of us to do what we have to do. So just believe and just keep pressing on, and God is going to lead us on. Trust and believe. That's all I got to say. Just keep on pressing. We got a job to do, and it must get done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And please share your name again once more.
It's Joseph Riley. I'm the executive director for Freedom Youth Family Justice Center, and I'm also Monique's husband.
I thought so. I heard Riley. Well, God bless you. God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Riley, and thank you for just encouraging us and enrolling us to do the work. Because there are so many young people that need us, and they need us now. They needed us yesterday. So thank you so much. Are there any other comments or questions before we go to break? Okay, I see an anonymous question. Let me see. What would you want the government to do to eradicate these issues? Ooh, that's a loaded question. Okay, well, Ruben, Aquil, Monique, any thoughts on that? How would you want the government to eradicate any of these issues?
I think for the department and where I work with, for victims and survivors of criminal, sorry, not criminal, but survival sex and, survival sex workers, as well as for those who are involved in domestic violence and sex trafficking. I think for us that, I think that they need to do more around education. I know that I keep saying that because it's so true. I've met many kids and parents alike, and some educators and even cops who say, well, I've never seen it. I don't know what it looks like. It's not happening here. I think it's because we're not putting enough education around them. If you think about it, when you go to the MTA or you go to your train or you're riding the train, they usually have all these different information up top. You can look at, etc. But there's never anything indirectly teaching our youth about ways to prevent human trafficking. There's nothing. There's not enough work or aftercare services that's happening for domestic violence victims. It's not enough information. It's not enough early intervention. We have all these different screening tools to know that if a child is going to be involved in this and that, but are we screening our youth, to say, well, this is a red flag. This person is more likely to be involved in sex trafficking. This person is living in a shelter. This person is more likely to be, what are we doing to educate them around this? So there needs to be more screening tactics going on, for individuals around domestic violence. There needs to be more assistance in schools for the teachers so that they can be able to identify it. A lot of teachers are unaware of how to identify if a person is being involved in any form of sex trafficking or teen dating violence. That's a problem because my kids spend more time in school with you than they do at home. So education is key, and I think that they need to have real laws and to sit down and have real laws that's created by people who have lived experience in order to really hit home and end a lot of the crisis that we're seeing around sex trafficking and domestic violence. So those are the two major things. And then the third, if I had to just say one last thing, would be we need to also crucify those, right? And I know I'm saying that's a big word, but crucify those who allow it to continue to happen. There's a lot of sex trafficking that's happening in our local hotels. Hotel owners are in on it. They're literally selling the keys over. And I know because I'm telling you, I do a lot of work where I have to go back into my old lifestyle, put on my old shoes, my old wigs, my old clothing, just to survive, just to help one survive, even if it's 1, 2, or 3. And we do this on a weekly basis. I work alongside Homeland Security, and this is what we do. And they're right here. People are saying their kids are missing. Their kids is right down the block. And the motel and hotel hold up down that way. And a lot of the officials are not doing much about it. They know where they are. If I can find them, you can find them. So you have to start holding the right people accountable. You can't just keep on saying, oh, it's the pimp, it's that person goes in jail, he come back out, he do it again. It is absolutely there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. there's no, like the people who are running the hotels and the motels are not getting in trouble for this happening on their premises multiple times. This is a law that we have been trying to establish for some time now. Like, we have to hold them accountable as well. If there was no supply, and there will be no demand. What are we doing to educate around that? And so that's what I believe, you know, from my standpoint of things, that the government should start working on: education, prevention, early intervention.
If I can, there's so many different levels of stuff the government can do in my line of work that would be beneficial. I mean, racially discriminating against young brown and black brothers throughout the system, showing them that we actually we're a reflection. Our kids are a reflection of the stuff that we show them, and we show them lack of funding within the school system. We show them nothing for them to do, and these are issues that the government could fix. And the more that they don't fix them, the more issues, and we're just gonna keep putting band-aids on it. I mean, there's so much that they can eradicate and get together and do on my side. I mean, down to the treatment in the hospital that the kids receive. It just, I mean, I don't even know where to end, start, or begin with that question.
And Ruben, did you have a final word to share on that before we go for break?
Oh, absolutely. And I think if the government were just to put a moratorium on spending on prisons, juvenile detention centers, any of that stuff, but not just a moratorium on that spending, but put an equivalent amount of money into the types of programs, street outreach efforts, it would change the whole game. And I'll just give you a quick stat, right? For most cities, if you just took, I'm not even talking about defund the police, although I do believe in that, right? But if you just took the overtime spending of the police, NYPD overtime reaches nearly $1 billion each year, right? And you think about, I can't even conceive or imagine of what that money could do, but I'm sure Aquil would agree. I see my good brother Clinton Lacey on the call, who used to run DC's system. But we talked about these ideas. If you could take these pots of money, and Clinton did it in DC, where he just brought a few kids home from out of state and freed up about $5-6 million that then he distributed to the community to hire full-time workers, credible messengers to work with young people and families. But think about that, right? And I'm sure that we have some young people out there that we're going, man, like, this young person's locked up because we're not sure if they're safe, and other people are safe if they're on the streets. It's that hot right now. But if you took that $750 million that the NYPD is going to spend on overtime, nearly $1 billion, that's enough money to hire for each young person 3 full-time staff, right? Who could be on 3 shifts, 3 8-hour shifts. They spend more than that on facilities. They spend more on that on cops who just move the problem around. Imagine if you could hire three full-time people for each young person. And if in the beginning they got to literally tie themselves to that young person and walk around every single day with that young person, sleep, outside their door at night to keep everybody safe, but in time help them grow. If you could take that money and start to give it to youth entrepreneurship ideas, if you could take that money and start to provide housing relocation, the government is already spending more than enough money to address this problem. They're just spending it on the wrong things. And I'm gonna get prophetic too. Like Monique said, that you'll see this in the toolkit. How did the Israelites get free? They plundered the Egyptians. They wound up giving their money, their silver and their gold, to the Israelites to go get free. And so I would say to the system leaders right now in the church to say to this, put the money now towards these things, or it's going to get to us one way or another. But better to give it up voluntarily than to have it taken from you in a way that you don't like. So yeah, government just needs to get out of the way, but put all the money that it's putting towards police, probation, parole, prisons, all of that, prosecutors, all of that stuff. Yeah, we can't ignore the issues, but if you were to fund the people, if you were to put the resources into the hands of young people, parents, credible messengers, businesses, there's credible messengers in Harlem right now that are taking over businesses that have shut down on blocks that people are afraid to go because of the young people who are on those blocks, taking over those businesses and then offering the young people on those blocks, listen, let us do business here. We'll teach you how to open your own businesses. And they're saying, all right, right. So that's what we need. most of all, just invest in the right thing.
Thank you all so much. Wow, Ruben, Aquil, Monique, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your some of your testimony and your lived experiences, and how you identify the youth, how they find you, how you're partnering already with people in your community, faith-based leaders, across beliefs, across denominations, and also in the secular and so on, and how others can help and support you, and then what government can do as it relates to these issues. But I'll say this, and then we're going to take a break now. But before people start jumping, please come back. I'm telling you, there's still more to come. So we're going to break. Let me see, it's 12:38 for 10 minutes. If we could come back at 12:48 so that we can have our final panel, and we can do our breakouts, and then we'll come back and we'll close. Wow, that was powerful. And Jackie, thank you for your comments in the chat. Everything you're saying is true. So you all take time to get up and stretch, take your bio break. If you hydrate, get you some water or energy drink, all of that good stuff, a lunch, a snack, and come back and meet us at 12:38. All right, everyone. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Let's keep the learning going. Let's keep the fellowship going and the encouragement. So at this time, we will have panel 2, and our theme is successful diversion programs and partnerships with community and faith-based organizations and government. On this panel, there are 2 of our esteemed panelists who have already spoken, who we've introduced, and those are Mr. Aquil Crooks and Reverend Maurice Winley, aka Reverend Mo. So I won't read their bios again, but we're welcoming some more esteemed panelists who I'm also excited to introduce you to. And that is the Reverend Dr. Charles Franklin Boyer, Miss Belinda Ramos, and unfortunately, one of our panelists, Mr. Jeff Williams, he's the interim director at the Foundation of Hope in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's not feeling well. He said he has lost his voice. So we're sending our positive thoughts and prayers out to him for rest, for restoration, and healing. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the remainder of and also I believe Ruben is also on this panel. So the Reverend Dr. Charles Franklin Boyer is a 3rd generation African Methodist Episcopal AME preacher. He is the pastor of Greater Mount Zion AME Church in Trenton, New Jersey, and the founder of Salvation and Social Justice, a nonpartisan Black faith-rooted public policy organization. He is also a senior consultant to the Social Action Commission of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME Church. Dr. Boyer is the leading faith voice in New Jersey for racial justice issues, the campaign to abolish the drug war, and the criminalization of Black people. His advocacy led to several statewide policy changes, such as racial impact analysis, closure of youth prisons, voting rights restoration for the formerly incarcerated, independent prosecutors, community reinvestment through cannabis taxes, and restricting solitary confinement. He led the campaign to free over 8,000 people from New Jersey's deadly prisons during the pandemic, making it the largest singular decarceration event in the state's history. Guys, I met Reverend Boyer and his wife, First Lady Rosalie Boyer, and some of their staff at Salvation and Social Justice a few weeks ago, and their passion for policy reform and demonstrating the gospel through action. And really that is each and every panelist that we have heard from and will hear from today. It's really, truly inspiring. He and his wife work alongside each other in their various servant leader capacities, and it's a blessing to witness. So Reverend Dr. Charles Boyer and Miss Belinda Ramos is the strategic advisor to the executive director, and that's Ruben Austria at Community Connections for Youth, aka CCFY, in the South Bronx. She is a nationally recognized technical assistance provider to system and community partners seeking to create alternatives for youth. CCFY's vision is to see a world where there are no kids in cages through community capacity building as an alternative to the youth justice system. Belinda is known for nationally training community mentors, credible messengers, related staff, and system professionals in supporting youth caught up in the justice system, and has used her passion and talents to support partners across the country to see CCFY's vision come alive. Her passion for teaching, coaching, strategizing has led her to influence key stakeholders in rethinking antiquated and malign methods that set youth back, and has opened the door to reimagining justice in a way that elevates youth in their communities. Belinda is also a co-founding member of the Credible Messenger Justice Center, a training and research center that brings together community, government, and academia to advance credible messenger mentoring and other programming in communities and jurisdictions around the country. Belle is an intelligent, powerful, she has a quiet countenance, but a very strong presence. She is a woman of many talents and gifts, and she has a servant's heart. She is an artist and graphic designer. Belle draws and paints the most beautiful paintings, and she's had her work featured on murals and many other places. So this is a power-packed panel. Power-packed. Yes, you all's lights shine so bright that we really do need sunshades. So friends, if you have, for any of our panelists that are sharing their stories, you have questions, comments, again, feel free to put them in the chat and engage. So yes, let's just dive right in to all of the panelists. Would you please, well, I would say for those who haven't shared your story, I think Aquil, you have done that, but actually Reverend Mo, you shared some, but if you could just share a little bit more, because you have a powerful testimony as well. You know, why you founded your organization and why you do the work that you do. So Reverend Mo, would you like to get us started, and then we'll follow up with Belinda?
Sure. Again, good afternoon, everyone, to my colleagues on the panel. As I stated, you know, I grew up in a Christian home, went to a private school that was founded by my grandfather from preschool, 8th grade. In high school, I was in an honors program, slated to become a doctor, gateway to medicine. But instead, I enrolled in Street University. I can recall in homeroom, a shot rang out. This is about 1989, in the height of the crack cocaine epidemic. A shot rang out in the homeroom, and saw a classmate taken, and the fear that filled my heart and mind. And I didn't want to be that person. So I donned a mask. I hid my genius and became part of the movement. And 16 years old, went to Rikers Island for a series of armed robberies. Rikers Island, at that time, they called it C-74 Adolescent at War, one of the worst adolescent facilities in New York City. From there, went to upstate, was in a 24/7 high security lockdown, Supermax, that's what they called it. Came home angry, bitter, blaming the system, not taking any responsibility for my choices or actions. Had an opportunity, was managing two CD retail stores, one in Harlem, one in Lower Manhattan, in conjunction with my aunt. And an altercation occurred where a gentleman tried to rob one of the stores, and we got into a physical altercation. He died, so I was charged with manslaughter. This is while I was on parole. And so my first offer was 10 to life, or I would take it to trial and get a minimum of 15 or a maximum of 25 to life. At that point, I was not taking any responsibility. I was blaming the individual. I was blaming my co-defendant for making a video confession. That was my mentality. It wasn't until I came to court one day and my lawyer told me, don't turn around because the deceased mother is sitting behind you. And when I turned around, she said, why did you kill my son? At that moment, I had what I call a horror of conscience. I didn't want to get a get out of jail free card, but I wanted to be forgiven. I was just overwhelmed with guilt, not only for that act, but for many things that I had done it to that point. I went to church, sat in the back of the church. Again, just wanted to get this weight lifted off. Couldn't control my tears. And it'd been a long time to that point where I even shed tears, to be quite frank. My father was ministering, and I remember he said the words, run for your life. And all I know is I found myself on the altar and rededicated myself to the Lord. I had to, as I shared with the case took a very aggressive posture once the mother appeared, and I had to appear for him in front of a grand jury. At that time, the grand jury painted a very horrific picture of the things I was involved with in prison, some of the incidents, that type of scenario. My father had prayed a prayer over me that was one of the scariest prayers I ever heard in my life. He said, God judges heart. And so when I went there, while the DA was painting this picture, I just told him that wasn't my intention. And I made a vow. I said, if I was given a second chance, I would dedicate my life to make sure other young people don't come down this path. When I went home, by the time I got home, my lawyer was screaming on the answer server that they threw the case out. And so Living Redemption is an expression of that vow. It's an expression of gratitude. When I think about the youth who did not even have half of the protective factors that I had established in my life in terms of family and heritage, and when I see what they have, my heart breaks. And so Living Redemption is that's the why, right? It's gratitude. It's a second chance. And so this journey of rebuilding this broken world by God's grace, through his grace, being able to build a tribe, a family that we've been laboring together for a decade, and just seeing how God is growing it and increasing the work, not only to youth, but to families, to community. That's our mission. Saving lives, healing communities, one relationship at a time. We want to see people live free, live full, and to live a legacy. And so I'll stop there because I'll stop there. And again, thank you for allowing me to share. But that's the why of Living Redemption.
Belinda, would you like to?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making space for me to be here, and I'm honored to be on this panel and hearing the stories and hearing most stories again. That story constantly, every time I hear it, it really just impacts me because of the goodness of God and what it looks like, to turn yourself over to that, because I see the work that's happening out of Harlem. And I'm just thankful. So the question is, why did I get, or how did I get to this point in my life? Let me put it that way. How did I get to this point in my life? Well, why I'm doing what I'm doing. Well, it's twofold. I was raised in church. I am the niece of two founding ministers in the Puerto Rican Spanish Pentecostal community in upstate New York, where all the New York transplants were leaving. And so I wasn't just I was raised in church and I was raised, to love God, but I was raised deeply in church culture as well. And that is, my life has ping ponged between those two things because my parents died when I was very young. And I turned to God when I was 10, when my mom died. I needed something because nobody was explaining what was going on. My life was falling apart. So from that point, that was like the reality of a childhood God became like really real. Everything else, like understanding Jesus and all those things, came later for me. But all that to say that while there was this growing, strengthening relationship with, something that was story on one end, but reality on the other end, in the backdrop, I also have my brother who was involved in the system from when he was 14 years old, landed in juvenile detention center, and now at 50 something years old is still looking to detangle himself from all the effects of that. So we were estranged for 15 years. I didn't know where he was. I only knew his date of birth because, like I said, my parents died, and but I only knew the last I saw him was the day my mom died, and he was, brought out of the juvenile detention center to meet in the hospital morgue, and that was the last time we saw each other. So, to have this growing relationship in the church, but then also the church culture and the dynamics that would keep, somebody like me growing closer to God, and another side, growing so distant, and being discouraged by the same faith that was promising one thing, but alienating him further. So, fast forward when I was 25 years old, this is when the internet started bumping, and, you could find things, and, it became the new encyclopedia. So I knew his date of birth. And after many years of people saying, "Where's your brother? Where's your brother? Where's your brother?" I find my brother, and he was in the New York State Department of Corrections, where it's public information, so long as you have a date of birth. And there he was after 15 years of wondering where he was and us being completely estranged. And so that began the second part of my journey. I volunteered at juvenile detention centers, through college, and I did all of that, almost like in a way of saying, I had this survivor's guilt that I didn't get the shorter end of the stick that my brother got. So everything in me was like every young person, especially working with young boys, was always an attempt of me trying to find my brother in these places. And so then I do find my brother, and then I got another baptism, which is somebody coming home from prison, and you have had no relationship with them. And you perpetuate every thought that the culture tells you about formerly incarcerated people, and how they just need to get a job, and how they just need to, and they just need to, and they need to stop, and they need to. And I came in with that ignorant energy. And I had to learn, what it meant for him to have been a product of all of this, not just, the justice system, but all systems that really serve to entangle you, in a way that you can break free out of one of them, but in breaking free out of one of them, you just go deeper into another. And it's very, very sick. And so, as my eyes became opened, more and more, it redirected that younger energy that I had to save my brother, as a young child, and do, volunteering and going every Saturday or every Tuesday night to meet with the kids that were incarcerated. It now became a different mission to use, to really change what was really happening. I only knew it for the experience, but now to have my eyes open more broadly to systems, and to how all of this, how these principalities that are seated in high places, how they work and what they're doing, and how it's doing that, and the people it's using to those ends. I fortunately am also a product of an enormous amount of grace, and a lot of open doors that have allowed me to get to CCFY. Don't ask me how I got here, because I can't tell you. I'm just here. And I'm really, really thankful for that. That's all I can say. I'm very, very thankful for that. And I'm thankful that I get to express my philosophical, biblical point of view that is based on the Beatitudes. And I get to express that to people who have been considered the least of these, that in this upside down kingdom, that the least is the most and the furthest back is the most forward. That I get to stand behind that in this context through one of the biggest issues facing the United States of America, which is mass incarceration. So I now, I get to express myself artistically through this work. I get to express my words. I get to share and hold space with people who I learn from and who uphold, these values that has been given to me from such an early age.
Thank you so much, Belle. And Reverend Dr. Charles Boyer, would you please share, share some of your testimony and story and why you were led to start Salvation and Social Justice?
Sure. I'm kind of just basking in the testimonies already shared. Feels like church. We offering up testimonies and it all really resonates. Growing up in poverty in New Jersey, growing up in the midst of the New Jersey racial profiling scandal with the state troopers, which ultimately became under investigation and supervision by the federal government. Growing up in that space, being the grandson of an AME preacher, growing up, in the Black church, Black family was all in the Black church and all of that, and really feeling like the Black church or the churches I was in and had experience in really weren't speaking to any of the issues that I was dealing with as a Black man. And so when the police were putting my face in the concrete, I felt nothing from them. And that began to shift a little bit as I would kind of watch the news, and there was one Black preacher that I did know, and I saw him over my grandfather's house, and he was connected, and that was Reggie Jackson at the time. He's in Atlanta now as a bishop. And so I saw him fighting on behalf, and that just kind of stayed in the back of my head, but I still resisted the church for many years. Ultimately, God got a hold of me through a court situation, and God turned that situation around. And it really, God really lifted me up out of addiction, out of a lot of things. Fast forward, hear the call of the Lord and go into ministry, and in seminary, we had to go through this process of a spiritual autobiography in order to kind of understand ourselves and what that means in regards to ministry. And so I had to answer the question, why did God, know me from my mother's womb, and I am a Black man born in the state of New Jersey, and now I am in the tradition of my grandfather and my father. What does that mean? And that led me down a path to explore African Methodism and the Black church, its roots in abolition and fighting against what was the slavery of its time, and then let me know that my lived experience meant something. And so what does that mean in today's context? Was that my calling, therefore, the scars that I have and my resurrection is ultimately in fighting for the liberation of Black people in the context of today's slavery, which is mass incarceration. And so Salvation and Social Justice comes from all of that, from all the seminary work, MDiv and doctoral work, which was all focused on the liberation of Black people through the Black church, the tradition, the history. There is no moment in the American context where the liberation of Black people has not been succinctly tied to Black faith and Black faith as a whole, whether you start with Richard Allen, which is the founder of our denomination, or whether you go to Sojourner Truth, the AME Zion, Harriet Tubman, and AME Zion, Frederick Douglass, bring it all the way down the line to Dr. King or Malcolm X from a Black Muslim perspective, regardless of where you are, or even if you even want to some degree talk about Barack Obama. And even though he rejected it, ultimately, King comes out of Trinity in Chicago. There was formation there. And so regardless of where you are, there is no liberation for Black people in the United States context without the Black church. And we have walked away from that in a lot of ways. And even when we're there, we shy away from saying the Black church or Black faith, or being very specific about it. And so that is why Salvation and Social Justice was born. And very specifically, our whole thing is there is no salvation without social justice. They are one and the same. Salvation and its original descriptors in the scripture, in the sacred text, is about deliverance from oppressors. Jesus comes in that prophetic tradition, and we have walked away from that. The salvation somehow is now merely some confession and a get out of hell free card, as opposed to setting the captives free, which is what Jesus tells us salvation is all about. The gospel is preaching the gospel to the poor and liberating the captives. And so that is the context which Salvation and Social Justice is born, my reading of the scriptures, the prophetic tradition, and the gospel, and why I'm here.
Thank you all so much. Thank and just ask a few of you some questions about more, to go into more depth about the work that you're doing and the results you're having. Reverend Mo, what is unique, or there are several things, but what is unique about your model at Living Redemption? Why does it work for the youth and families in Harlem that you've been serving over these years? And I have a third question, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, what is strategic for us is the life on life discipleship that's integrated into the work, particularly building these credible messages. Individuals from the community, you're investing in them life on life. Many of them were former gang leaders themselves, and now you've brought them in to not only be employees, but to be co-founders and co-leaders of the work. All right, and again, it's in the context of life on life discipleship. So that for me has always been the unique value proposition of our work, of our model. It's like the hidden gem. Many of the programs experience a lot of turnover amongst staff, and also not really being able to properly discover, develop, and deploy credible messengers at every level. So we are a credible messenger-led organization at every level. Me as the founder, I'm a credible messenger. We have directors who are credible messengers. We have managers, we have frontline staff, even individuals after they complete youth, and after they complete, they're coming on board as employees, right? So this is built into the fabric. So that would say one of the unique things. And because of that investment, I would say another unique value proposition is the ability to connect to the pain, and the ability to connect to bring resources to the real-time crisis that people are facing, right? Without having to go through a lot of when people need help, they need it real time. And so being available in those crisis moments with youth, with families, whether it's at court, whether it's a hunger, whether it's a mental breakdown, whatever those crises, because we always state that our philosophy, the opportunity is in that crisis. Jesus entered into our crisis. And so there's a power of proximity when you're able to come near and come alongside and bring tangible deliverance, right? Relief to that situation. It brings credibility to work. So that's another point. I think another point is, and I talked about it, it's the culture of connectedness. When you hear of mentoring, many people hear that in a very superficial lens. Site-based mentoring, one-on-one mentoring. I know going through Big Brothers, a lot of the mentoring training, it was you spend a 1 hour. Again, we're talking about life on life, right? And so this is a different type of approach, and we've been able to really bring, I think, one of the unique factors is also creating this place of connection. Like I said, it's the culture of connectedness that we've been able to facilitate with the youth. Many of the staff, they call it the living room effect, right? When people come, they feel that they belong. And so I'm talking about youth who were, shooting at each other. But when they come in, there's a dynamic that they're able to experience where they're able to really take off that mask, that fear. And so that I feel that those are some factors that have led it to our model. I think another distinctive factor of our model is that 95% of our investments in terms of program operations is from government. And we have not compromised our mission. We have not compromised our witness. We've actually have helped to redefine models. And so that's why I say investments in terms of when we're bringing, we brought forth how we want to approach it. So when the signature investment from the district attorney's office, monies that was seized from HSBC Bank as part of for embezzlement, the Manhattan district attorney, if money wasn't an option, what would you do to prevent you from entering the criminal justice system? That was the question. And from that question, we just shared a vision. And that vision became an RFP. And then that RFP, there was a $10.6 million investment. So again, I would say that's a unique value proposition of our work. And now similarly, that's expanding into working with families and additional systems. So the Administration for Children's Services, you're working with New York City Department of Probation, and each of these systems are investing in community-driven, or I should say Holy Spirit inspired approaches, new paradigms and praxis to dealing with the cancer and sin that's pillaging our communities. And so that, I'll stop there. Those are some of the value points unique of our model and our approach. And it's unrelentless. I mean, the outreach is, we are relentless in pursuing young people. We're relentless, and those that most people will walk away from because of fear, because they're the ones that's doing the shooting, they're the ones that's doing, those are the ones we target intentionally. So that's another aspect of our work. We target those hard to reach. Those are the ones that we specifically target.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Reverend Moa. You jumped in. I love it. You just flowing with it and already answered the question about partnerships with government. And I love how you raised that you have not compromised on your mission and the work that you do by partnering with government and getting government funding. So hold that, because we're definitely going to circle back. There's actually a question in the chat. I think it's from Norman. We'll circle back to it though, about like separation of church and state, like within, the work that we're doing. Aquil, would you talked about earlier, you shared sort of details about the model of Street Safe Bridgeport and some of the work that you all do, going within the hospitals. If young people are kicked out the house, 3 a.m, you all show up. But is there anything more, any additional things you want to share about the unique model of Street Safe Bridgeport, and why you believe that it's working, that it's working for the young people and families that you serve?
Some other unique aspects that we do is we also go into the juvenile facilities and into the schools, and we do groups, and we provide mentorships. Prior to COVID, we had and we're getting it back together, a program that we ran in the juvenile facility in our state, in which we dealt with young adults who are on their way of coming home, and we provide mentorship in the last 6 months of them in prison. And then we also continue that mentorship once they release. Once they're released, we then help them we then help them get their identification, help them find jobs, and help them get on the right foot. And the reason why I believe this program it works is because we meet all our kids where they're at. Like, you don't have to come to us. You don't have to qualify for this program. You don't have to jump through these hoops. We're here to give you the work. We're here to help you navigate and move yourself to the next level. And some programs get caught up in numbers, and some programs get caught up in filling these quotas, and we're not here for that. And we get that the numbers provide the funding, and we get that those are things that have to be done, but we're right now taking the quality of work over the quantity. We're going to make sure we're giving these young adults the jobs, then the goals, help them set the goals and successfully complete these goals in their lives so that they don't have to be going in and out of the criminal justice system all of their lives.
Thank you, Aquil. Belinda, I know that Ruben has shared some of touch base on CCFY's model, but could you expound a little more? This idea of it's very unique, definitely. This idea of capacity building, training, and equipping. Basically showing other grassroots, community-based organizations and leaders how to sustain the work, how to grow the work, how to establish these kinds of partnerships. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the work that you all are doing in that aspect in particular, and how, what are you seeing, you and Ruben, as a result of what you're doing and helping to support and undergird other leaders, such as folks like amazing leaders like Monique and Aquil, within the Bronx, and really now you're starting to do this across. You've been doing this across the country. Again, what are you seeing, and how is that positively directly impacted system-involved youth and their families?
Yeah. Well, Ruben talked a lot about, the work that happens locally, how we're working with youth and families, and our design, which is, CCFY serving as, somewhat of a hub to help strengthen organizations out there that young people could be referred to. A lot of times communities are looked at as there's a lack of resources, but there isn't a lack of resources. There is a lack of resources. So, natural resources are every day. I was surrounded by them all the time. The person who checked on me, the person who told on me, the person who, would, if I was hungry, could roll up in her house and be like, "Tu quieres comer?" The resources are there. But the resourcing of those resources, so what those resources look like, that they don't look effective, or they don't look like there's much. I realize people like to give money with something that already looks like it has money. So, if it has the look of money, people are going to want to give to it because it looks good. And so what happens is, that's at least the world I grew up in, and all the resources in I didn't grow up in New York City. I grew up in Newburgh, New York, which is outside of New York. It's urban. It's not the size of New York City, same issues, same poverty. I grew up in, projects. I grew up in, on the block. And again, there was so much there, especially churches. So, our work is around leveraging the natural resources of the community, because these are the communities that young people come home to. But if they're seen as not being resourced to do the work or respected to do it, there are people, and I continue to meet them besides the ones that I knew in my own childhood. But as I continue to do this work, and we network with community organizations out there that are, and systems that are ready to fund how we can bridge the gap to create initiatives and create, pilot programs and things that would create a channel of resources for the resources that are out there, and train them and equip them. There are programs for young people, in our case, Community Connections for Youth, serving as a hub to, a young person comes out or is, touched by the system. What are the options that they have? There's programs out there. There may not be, there's art programs, but they may not have the skill to work with a justice involved young person, and that's exactly why they came in contact with us. So we can train that. We can train you on the do's and don'ts of working with the system. We can come up with plans, and so that's kind of our on our capacity building work. So there's training, there's relationship building that needs to happen first and foremost. There's just the gatherings that need to happen, the think tanks that need to happen, and they have to happen unique to whatever area or region that you're in. This is not about cookie cut work. This is about who the homegrown people that are there who understand the issues and can understand it from a place that they don't need to be trained in what life is like. If you were justice involved, or if you were, raised on the block, or with the social pressures that are there, you don't have to train that aspect, but you might need to train on some other things for how to do this well and how to do this unto success. So that's some of the, the work that we are doing. And so, it's our work is to kind of build upon, those things to make it greater by bringing it together. Because that's the strength is going to be in uniting forces, and creating opportunities through that powerful network, because nobody can really, the ocean shore is really long and wide on the issue of mass incarceration. There's never going to be enough people at the table right now in order to do what needs to be done. And so this is an all hands on deck, and everybody can play their part. And so some of our work at CCFY is to figure out how everybody can play their part. So when I think about what governments can be doing, they can get out the way, but they can use the money that they so easily extract from, the average citizen, and give it to those who know what they're doing. I'm not going to take, my son, over a dental issue to a car mechanic. Why are we putting those resources in the hands of somebody who can't really, who don't know what they're doing? So that, our work is to get ahead of that, to create advocacy around that, to use our name, to advance that, as we've seen successes in our own program.
Thank you so much, Belle. I appreciate you. This is great. This is amazing. So I have one more direct question, and then I have a question for each and every one of you. There is a question I think there may be a question or two in the chat. We'll see if we can get to that. We're going to go to 1:55 and then do breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and conclude. So Reverend Boyer, can you share more about some of the successful, fruitful youth justice and diversion advocacy work that you have led and been a part of through or by way of Salvation and Social Justice? And why is public policy reform and government, I'm calling it rerouting of funding, and this is a theme that has been coming up consistently with I'll just say, with Ruben, his Soros Justice Fellowship Project and beyond was redirecting funding, local, state funding and or federal funding away from incarcerating youth, right? Shutting down these juvenile detention centers, and rerouting it into community-based initiatives and alternatives for incarceration. Right. Thank you. Yes, we're definitely going to talk about the toolkit. I appreciate that. CPJ is on it. And then, Belle just mentioned that this is just a common theme. But Reverend Boyer, you have also been doing this work on a lot of the public policy reform and redirecting some of these state funds in New Jersey to away from, incarceration and other methods through which this funding is being sourced to these kinds of organizations, grassroots organizations and alternatives to incarceration. Can you talk more, maybe give us one or two examples of that work and the success that you will progress that you have made in that area?
For sure. And again, I want to commend my co-panelists on fantastic work being done. Definitely want to connect, especially y'all right over the river. We got a lot of talking to do. I think you all could be really helpful with some of the things that we're putting together here in Trenton specifically. In order to answer this question, I have to give a major shout out to my wife and the co-founder SNSJ, who was on the line, Rosalie, my co-laborer, and her co-laborer and the other architect of this work, Retha Onatiri, both who are here. I call them Mary and Martha. Because they're just always at it, and they're always working, and they really play such a pivotal part in this work specifically. We partnered with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice many years ago around the advocacy of youth prison closures here in New Jersey. A lot of advocacy around that, which led to an announcement under the Republican governor of the closure of two of New Jersey's youth prisons. Also in alignment with that, during the COVID pandemic, and when we advocated for the release of people during the pandemic, we made sure to include youth as well. And so the youth prison population dwindled significantly, at least by, again, about 33%. To the lowest it has been in decades, which also led to the closure of certain kind of youth affiliated halfway houses and began to reduce. What we did in the midst of all that, even Adam, we went around to various communities throughout the state: Paterson, Newark, Camden, Trenton, Atlantic City, New Brunswick, and had discussions with nearly 100 folks directly impacted and otherwise in these various cities. Mostly these discussions happen again within Black churches, because that's our wheelhouse, and had these discussions and developed from there a toolkit around restorative justice helps, alternatives, what the community wanted to see, a restorative response to situations in community that also included things like violence interruption, peacemakers, and things of that nature. That toolkit then turned into legislation. That legislation led to an $8.4 million appropriation for a pilot program, which was signed into law last summer. The folks that we work with, and so that RFP has gone out. The folks that we work with in Paterson have won. Here in Mercer County, that RFP is just coming out. This represented nearly a 20% movement of resources from the incarceration budget to here. Also, part of the work that we're doing, as another example, part of the whole cannabis legalization piece, and how we fought to make sure 70% of the sales tax revenue is coming back to the impact zones, which are these very same cities for the most part, as well as a social equity excise tax. Part of the work going forward is to advocate during budget season to make sure that these dollars, again, are coming back to resource these kinds of alternatives. The last piece that I would add, that kind of advocacy also led to our direct impact work here in Trenton around violence interruption and the entire restorative justice hub piece that we are building out here. And we have implemented the Trenton Restorative Street Team, which is doing peacekeeping on the ground. And that too is a movement of resources to community-led organizations. So we are not the only one. Obviously, Newark Community Street Team is a national model, but also the Paterson Healing Collective gets some of those resources as well. And so those are the kinds of things that we're doing. And again, all of those people that are working for us and those other organizations directly impacted, formerly system involved folks that are doing the work and informing. Now we have a cyclical piece that continues to inform the advocacy, the policy, the legislation, and actually implementing the work on the ground.
Thank you so much for that, Reverend Boyer. For all panelists, and it's no pressure in this question. It was just I'm flowing also. so we've been talking about your unique models and the work that you are doing with youth and families. But does anyone have just a quick story? If there's a young person that comes to your mind who you have worked with, who you've been working with, who you've seen some just transformation, restoration. I think it's important for us to you don't have to say their names, but just to uplift one of the very many stories of the young people that you've impacted. So I don't know if everyone wants to go, but definitely, Reverend Mo, if there's a young person that comes to mind, I'm sure there are many, or family, and also Aquil. Did you have one that you just like to share with us?
Yeah,
Sure.
I had a young man who I was mentoring, and he was passed around to like 3 different mentors. And when I tell you, he was a headache, and he just didn't care. He was heavily medicated sometimes, but he was over medicated. He came from a family of trauma where his mother was abused by his father, like beat just about to death. And he just wouldn't get it and didn't care. He just thought he had to be the toughest person in the room, but he was a Teddy Graham. And literally working with him and the late night phone calls and trying to get him through school, he finally we got him to graduate, and now he's working a full-time job, helping his mom out, and his perspective and the things that he's doing in life. If we would have said this 4 years ago, we would not have even thought that he would have made it out of high school. And he was a project that, and I meant, and not to call him a project, he's a person, but he was something or someone that it took the work. Like, we had to put the work in with him, and it paid off, because now he's on a roll and a path to live a successful life.
Thank you, Aquil. Reverend Mo?
Yeah, I was going to share one of my spiritual daughters come to mind. When I met her, she was a participant. She was actually an alumni in an Arches program, and at that time, in conjunction with Community Connection for Youth, we were leading out a leadership development program for those who had completed Arches. Arches was like a 9-month intensive transformative mentoring program. And again, with conjunction with CCFY, we was deploying this leadership program where you kind of build them forward as leaders, develop their own curriculum, and let them go forward, paying for what they've received through Arches. This young lady, I remember it was like, she was like a wildcat, to be quite frank. I mean, like rough, very cold, very distant, and it's almost to the point, why was she there? You follow me? Because it was like, the anger that she carried, and the intensity, 4 children, or really 3 at that time. And again, just through the process, I remember we had a retreat where we led a retreat with them, and sharing my testimony is like, we just really connected. She just kind of like latched on. And so just to fast forward, just to see her transformation. And it's a lesson in this work, because a lot of times we have to be able to see incremental change, right? Everybody's not going to just snap your finger. This is not a magic bullet. Transformation, healing, it's a lifelong journey. But again, just speaking to where she is, where she was, where she is now, like I said, she's a formidable leader, powerful voice, well respected. Like, I mean, in talking about contact work, her ability to kind of stay on top of the young ladies, even the young men, to navigate them through systems, you know, how she's processing her pain of being exploited, all those things, you follow me, and just coming and presenting herself, and that now she's the mother of four, single mother of four, and to see her stand and continue to strive and go forward. So that to me, that's what I call a breakthrough. And so we're preparing. When I see her, I always tell her, you being prepared to impact a generation, you know. And so like I said, again, seeing her at that point, not wanting to speak, still shy, you know, many of us who speak, you know, we deal with those type of inhibitions initially, but those sometimes are the individuals that have the most to say. And she's one of those types that, you know, you got to really goad her, really get her to speak. But when she does, it's impactful. So just to see her, I would bring her, and there's many others, but that's the one that was just right there in my chest at the moment.
Thank you, Reverend Mo. Bell and/or Reverend Boyer, did you have one? If not, don't worry. We've got the questions are pouring in the chat, and of course, Bell, we definitely want you to speak about the toolkit. So, okay, well, Belinda, would you drum roll, please? Would you please tell us about this faith-based toolkit that you and Ruben at Community Connections for Youth have been working tirelessly on in partnership with us at CPJ? Can you tell us more about that, and you know how it will be helpful to everyone who is on the line, and community leaders, faith-based leaders, as it relates to diversion work?
Yes. So I have lots of stories, so I didn't want to share them just because I feel like there were other people's stories, but being a witness to what mentors make possible, credible messengers make possible, we could sit here like really, it's amazing. But I'm gonna get to this toolkit. So CPJ, you know, we've been having contact over some other things, and somebody threw out the idea of, you know, creating some type of toolkit for clergy and churches to be able to get involved. And, you know, Ben and I, as soon as we heard it, like we didn't have time, like we really did not, but it was just we both come from, you know, the same paradigm of, you know, being, you know, lovers of God, and also, you know, involved in church and seeing where the disconnect is at. And, you know, for me, I went to a Christian undergrad school, so I've been around all the theologians and the on and on and on. And I never saw how this was translating over into something practical, because church culture often trumps what you know about the Bible. And so, you know, and it sits within a culture that really blinds a lot of, is blinded by a lot of the issues at hand. And so I kind of feel like I'm right now preaching to the choir. You know, we have, you know, ministers and folks of the faith that are, you know, are also working towards liberation and Black liberation. So it goes, you know, this is it's a Black issue. It's an issue of people of color in the United States when it comes to incarceration. So for me, you know, sometimes it's not always preaching to that group because it's already been intimately woven into the idea of liberation and oppression. And so we're like, how do we expand this, and how do we bring light to an issue to the houses of hope? I mean, it's not just churches, they are little boxes of hope that are on corners and on, you know, streets. And so if they're being that hopeful, like how can they begin to address the biggest issue happening in our country? And so there are people out there who have the desire, who want to start something in their churches, don't know where to begin. And so, you know, Ruben and I, you know, we were excited to do this because it's already something that we felt like there isn't enough resourcing out there on it. And we put something together that was really about like the lowest hanging fruit. You know, I grew up in church, so it was like, you know, people want to be pastors or worship leaders, but it's like, all right, let's just start by cleaning the church or putting the chairs out. You know, like, where do you start to serve? You know, if you want to be a leader, like, where do you start to become the servant that a leader needs to be, right? And it's in the lowest hanging fruit, what's right in front of you. And so we wanted to put something together that was how can clergy, how can churches get involved, or what are the small steps that they can take to support young people who are facing the many levels of justice systems that there are out there? How can they begin to do that? But then also marry that to, a biblical view of the problem. Not just saying, the problem is incarceration. The problem is the oppression that incarceration is the answer to. It becomes part two to it. So we wanted to put something together that was accessible, that was through biblical storytelling and through anecdotal storytelling, that helps folks form, a theology that is rooted, that gives life to their faith, that puts faith and works together to say, now that you're seeing the light on the issues, here are our incarceration numbers, here are some numbers as to the cost to incarcerate a young person, and what saving money on just one young person, what that can do to this issue. So it's called Reimagining Justice, and a toolkit for faith-based leaders. So we are excited that it is almost done, and you're taking the first look at it. We discuss some of the alternatives that are out there for churches. A lot of folks just don't know. I mean, everywhere I go, people ask what I do, and so it just becomes a portal to have another kind of conversation. And it's amazing to me how little people who are actually interested in this issue, there's such a disconnect as to what's out there. So when people hear things like defund the police, how scary that sounds. You're saying, oh, we're going to be left without protection. That's not the conversation. It's like, we're not also having a conversation with the and then what? That there is a lot of and then what that's actually much more effective than what the justice system provides, that it's about correction and not true transformation, that it's about compliance and not real behavioral change, that it's about, compliance in life and not really finding an identity and a truth about who you are. So a lot of folks don't know that there are all these resources out there. And so we begin to educate folks on like what might be right in your neighborhood, what you're looking for in those things that can be alternatives, how you can get behind that, how you can show up at court with a young person, what writing one letter can do, like Stephanie had said at the beginning, what one letter, one voice can mean to an entire lifetime for a young person, that you can completely change the trajectory from somebody to go deeper into oppression in the mouth of the lion, where there is more darkness, or you can reach them now at this point through a letter to say, this young person has my vote of confidence. I'm going to be there for them in this way by connecting them to this resource. And, judges want to see that. Folks out there want to see that. I saw a question in the chat about, how do you get police and bureaucrats? I don't have a short answer to that. And the answer I do have, even if it's the longest, it's still not going to be a sufficient answer. But I can say that I do find that when people start to see the effects of support and the effects of people being there and the effects of people who can speak and cut through. I speak 2 languages. It's a whole other thing to communicate when I can communicate in Spanish to somebody, even if they speak English and I speak English. There's just something about when we're in our language and I can speak to you from that vantage point, that it's not just a matter of the message coming clear. I make connection. There's bonding that happens just by code. And so, when officers and I want to say well-meaning, I'm not talking about the outliers of people who are out to do evil. Those are in every camp out there, right? But when you start to begin to show folks what is possible, and when they start to see young people, the effects of mentoring in those young people, you start to build hope. That's what testimony is. You start to open eyes, and you start to see that there is another door that you weren't even privy to. that is that there's great transformation at the end of that. So the goal of this toolkit is to put those types of small moves, those small steps that you can take in order that can have like really, really deep and wide ripple effects in the individual lives of young people. And on the other end, on the lives, when what Ruben was saying that, that a clergy member standing at the steps of a protest or what have you, or advocating that they count 1,000, I believe he said, with that, then that we can say, well, okay, well, then we can work exponentially through this toolkit by giving you the small steps that you can take, because you as a minister represent 1,000-fold. So think about that. So that's what's exciting to me when I think about that. That folks who are desirous, but again, we also want to provide the education behind all of this, because well-intentioned people with improper tools can cause harm. And so we want to make sure that you're not perpetuating, or churches aren't perpetuating something that for young people feels and smells like what it's like to go through a system. It's just the church system. So we want to, educate on multiple levels and on multiple forms. So that's what this toolkit is about. And I'm excited, to get it into everybody's hands and hear people's feedback on it.
Thank you so much, Belinda. The chat is blowing up. We're excited. CCFY, Belinda and Ruben have been, they've been working tirelessly, countless hours on this toolkit to make sure that you have something in your hands that you can utilize. There are, I'll just say really quickly, there are group questions, and there are sections, 3 main sections within this toolkit that talk about, deliverance, right? What does God say about God's people, right? And about deliverance, and with scriptural references. But there are also group questions throughout the toolkit. There are links, there's statistics. This is a very rich toolkit. And my wonderful colleagues, Deborah and Ella, have put in the chat, but I'll also say, yes, you will have access to this toolkit. We will be emailing it, blasting it out within the next couple of, week or two. Just want to put the final touches on it so that you have an excellent product that you can share, right, amongst your congregants, colleagues, wherever you are, whatever industry you're in. We have a few more questions. I'll just throw out 2 or 3, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do our breakout sessions. Thank you all so much. This has just been so rich. There was a question in the chat. What do you think of the success of the Cure Violence model in New York? So Reverend Mo, Belinda, and/or Ruben, if you have any quick thoughts on that, please feel free to share. They say, the question again is, what do you think of the success of the Cure Violence model in New York?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, when we say the success, we have to determine, what are we defining as success, right? And so the Cure Violence model it's an effective model. I think it's something that we can contextualize a bit more. In my experience, that many of my staff were a part of the initial Cure Violence movement, specifically in Harlem. I saw it as it could be a little bit exploitive of the staff in terms of why I saw that they were not getting the care that they needed, particularly when you have individuals, violent interrupters, the type of trauma, hospital responders, the type of situations that they were seeing. And that's kind of how I connected who is processing them, who is shepherding them, who is really caring for them, right? Because it becomes about stats. And so, like I said, it's an effective model, but there's definitely some need for innovations, particularly around the development of and the care of credible messengers. I think also accountability, because in terms of what defines you as credible, right? Because there's a credible messenger, particularly in our work, there are many moving definitions of that, right? And so many people define credible messages as simply as someone who is a former gang leader or who has still ties, who can walk through the streets and can make things happen. You follow me? And so where we define credible messenger, yes, you have that experience, but really your credibility is your transformation. That is your credibility. So again, the Cure Violence model it's definitely something that's very heavily invested in New York. And it does have an impact in terms of public safety. You follow me? But like I said, those are just some of my critiques, I guess, from the inside of that model, of that approach, particularly how I've been privileged to be involved with it. Those are my
Thank you.
thoughts.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that honest, open, and transparent feedback and reflection, Reverend Mo. I don't know, Ruben or Bell, do you have any thoughts on the quote unquote success of the Cure Violence model in New York? And if not, we have another question also.
I just ditto on everything, Reverend Mo just said. I've trained a lot of the Cure Violence. We've gotten contracted to do training that we would do for credible messengers. And, again, that's the perfect set that perfectly, Reverend Mo, defining success is, in terms of violence interruption. I think it's an amazing model, and I think it can be developed out more. In terms of its role as a mentorship program, or does it easily lend to that? That's a different kind of conversation. The healing that needs to happen in our communities. There's a whole other bookend that has to happen, and that re-traumatization, and also, young people ultimately, to really cure violence, there has to be healing. And so, where does that part 2 come in? And that doesn't necessarily mean that it lies on Cure Violence to answer that question, but there may be room for other things to come in up behind it to strengthen it even more.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. We've got, I'll ask, I don't know if I can get to both of them, but one question that we had in the chat earlier by Norman, I don't know, Norman, if you're still here, but thank you for this question. How do you keep the separation between church and state as you do your work or in doing your work? So I'm going to leave that open. If anyone on the panel wants to jump in and share on that one.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we're first of all, we have a separate legal entity that all of our, I would say, government funded programming is coming through. So that's number one. And that's an important, because any funds that come into the church proper, then it's open to that funder's inspection, right? So that's very important. And then number two, it's really we really about serving, right? And so it's not about proselytizing. And again, it's almost going back to what we define as success, and what I feel are some of the old wineskins that we adhere to, that we determine as success or a move of God. You follow me? And so when I look at Jesus, it was about building relationships, investing his life in these individuals. And he did that through proximity, right? Being with them. He chose them to be with them. So all of the programs many of the programs we described are housed in the church, in our building. You follow me? And so, that gives an opportunity. So we're strategic. We don't have to compromise. We pray. You follow me? We can share scripture. You follow me? But that's not a condition for them receiving the services that we provide. You follow me? And I think that sometimes if we again, it's about credibility. Build that credibility. Build the right to share the gospel with someone. build, but you follow me, we're quick to pass a track or, and again, I'm not knocking these things, but build a relationship. You follow me? And out of that relationship, you get to share your life. And so again, it's all about intention. It's being wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove, strategy. We understand our context. But like I said, we haven't had any problems, like I said, and we're known, the church is known as being a servant to the community. You follow me? Once you build, that's the reputation, building that reputation. So it'll do away with it. I think a lot of that is just, it's like archetypes, it's generational set patterns of thinking, where really, if we really are kingdom minded, then we know that the church should definitely be influencing government. And we see that throughout scripture. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Reverend Mo. There's an anonymous question for you in the chat, and then I can circle back to separation of church and state if any other panelists have a follow-up. We're gonna adjust the panel, the breakouts a little bit, because I think it's important to get to this. Reverend Mo, can you elaborate a little bit on it's life, when you mention life on life discipleship? I think you're kind of already talking about it, but is there anything else to add? What is life on life discipleship?
Yeah, for me is I'm walking alongside individuals. I'm sharing my life. I'm sharing the grace. I'm not hiding certain aspects of my life. I'm sharing what God has done. I'm sharing with them. They're sharing their lives. And that's a different environment, a work environment. When you put that into a work environment or organizational culture, that's different. That redefines supervision, right? And that redefines so much other, culture, your culture, in terms of your norms, your practices. But that's what it is. It's that transparency. We're taught to compartmentalize, leave your problems at home, and you got to come here. And so no, we understand you got to make sure you're aware of your luggage in terms of, your baggage and whatever challenges you're having, and obviously how that impacts the mission. But we create that space for, like I said, life on life, where we can bring the truth and the power of God to real-time moments in your staff as well. You follow me? So, and when you create that, it's authentic, and it's authentic when the young people experience that. There's a freedom, there's a ethos that's established when you have that kind of synergy, when you have those type of norms established. But that's what it is. Like our team it's not the typical organization. We're going to dinner together. We're doing retreat. We love being with each other. And I don't know how many organizations can say that, right? In terms of staff, when you think of, sometimes jobs, they can really be a laboring experience, right? In terms of it's stressful, so that's what we mean by life on life discipleship. Again, bringing the word of God in every moment of their lives, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but it's organic, it's relevant, right? It's relevant, right? And so that's what we mean by life on life disciple. And again, being a model of that, if you're having a bad day, you're dealing with some stressful decisions, being willing to share that and even allow the team to undergird that, right? And so this transparency, this environment of introspection, and like I said, applying the truth of God to every situation that we encounter. That's what we mean by life on life discipleship.
Thank you for that, Reverend Mo. Monique, I saw you in the chat, and when Reverend Mo said, being transparent about your story, right? And it reminded me of what you were saying earlier, essentially the same thing in breaking down that taboo and stigma, being relevant, relatable, right? Like just not being afraid to open up and to share your lived experiences with the young people and families you're working with. This is amazing. Center for Public Justice, I have to read something really quickly. For those of you that are interested to learn more, the Center for Public Justice has done a ton of work in helping faith-based organizations work in partnership with government and has many tools to help faith-based organizations and leaders. So after this convening, please know that there are more resources available to address your questions, and the separation of church and state, and also grassroots organizations, community organizations, faith-based organizations partnering with government, right? So does anyone else, any other panelists have any thoughts or anything you want to share about separation of church and state in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in just a little bit. I think Pastor Mo really hit it all perfectly. And just to add or highlight, I think that is often thrown out there because it is a strong misconception of what that is and what it means. And it's really to protect against the European model, right? In the American context, the European of having a state-sponsored religion, which then dictates what the state wants upon the people through the religion. And so it's important that we understand that context. It also is there to protect against, for instance, a particular religious ethos having undue influence upon the government. And so what it does not mean is that people of faith and faith entities cannot advocate. What it does not mean is that faith-rooted and aligned entities cannot do service work, as Pastor Mo, I think, perfectly laid out there. And so I mean, there is no space, again, throughout the context of the United States, and also within the context of all of our various faith traditions. The prophetic tradition as a whole is one where faith engages and holds government accountable. If the separation of church and state was understood as a context to keep faith entities in line, we would have no Dr. King, we would have no emancipation. All of us would still be in chains and whatnot. So it's really important that we understand that, and that we must engage. And I think too many people have heard that separation of church and state and have used it as an excuse more than anything else not to get involved.
Woo! Okay. Look, we could keep going. Thank you so much. Thank you, Reverend Mo. Thank you, Reverend Boyer, for providing that historical context. That is very important. You're absolutely right, because it's very easy to take these kind of terms and potentially take them out of context or misunderstand or incorrectly frame them. So I appreciate you framing that for us. And for Reverend Mo, you giving us specific examples of how you do this with your organization. You're not seeking to proselytize, immediately, or it's not that, but to actually just serve and to show up and to support young people, meet them where they are and their families. So you all, it's about to be 2:10 p.m. If everyone just give a virtual round of applause to our amazing speakers and panelists. We're gonna do phenomenal, powerful. Thank you all so much. We're very, very grateful for you taking out time to share with us. We're gonna go into breakout rooms. We have about 29 people that stayed on. Hope you all will stay. Let's go into the breakout rooms. We'll be randomly paired. The questions will show up in the chat so we can meet some of each other, and then we'll come back, identify someone as a scribe, and also identify someone who's willing to report out if we have time. We're going to come back. We have just a couple of announcements and thank yous, and then we will close out in prayer. So is there a group, really quickly, maybe one or two, someone who feels led or would like to share with the entire group what you all discussed in your group, something that resonated with you today and or inspired you, something you learned, in anything. Would someone like to share really quickly, maybe in 2 minutes? Yes, please. Lisette.
So hi everyone, I'm Lisette from CCFY. We had a very rich group and we had some serious geographic representation. We had Seattle in the house, we had North Carolina in the house. We had the East Coast, we had, you know, foundation representation, we had government representation, we had grassroots representation. So that was just so beautiful. I would like to quote devotion to God, faith in action. And that was Fleming El-Amin. That really just like resonated. The undergirding role of faith, you know, that faith is active. And everyone really appreciated the transparency that folks came to this with. So really grateful to be part of this convening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisette. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else would like to share? Don't everybody jump at once. Alrighty then. Well, a few things, just a few quick announcements and thank yous. It's just been really just a pleasure. I know there's so many other, I know you've got work deliverables and scopes of work that you're working on, and you know, phone calls and meetings and all of these things that you have. But we just, again, at the Center for Public Justice, we so appreciate you taking out time to just connect, to fellowship, connect and network. Please make sure to sign up for the Center for Public Justice's newsletter. Deborah and Ella, they're going to drop the CPJ's website in the chat. So make sure you hook up and link up. Also, CPJ is on all social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, and we also have a series. We've been doing this series hosting this series for quite some time about restorative justice and youth diversion work, incredible messengering and the like. And so there are so many videos, interviews. Some of our panelists have been interviewed on there. So definitely check out CPJ's Instagram if you're on Instagram, Facebook. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, speakers, Reverend Mo, Monique, Ruben, Reverend Boyer, Aquil. I know Jeff is not here. I believe I called everybody's name. If not, please just put it in the chat because I'm doing this from my phone and from my memory. So if I forget, it's not, you know, it's the head and not the heart for sure. Yes, Bill, girl. I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you all so much. Look out for the toolkit. I want to give a special thank you also to the CPJ team. Stephanie, our amazing CEO. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To the entire team, Deborah and Ella. They've been doing an amazing job with our technology. Thank you. And behind the scenes, registration links and all the above, flyers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also my colleague Emily and Maddie. So you all, Maddie is our advocacy manager at CPJ. She is going to be following up with you. So you will hear from Maddie pretty soon. And again, we'll send you the toolkit. I believe. Thank you, everyone, for participants taking out the time to come. If there's anything else that I missed, just let me know. Oh, we'll be hosting listening sessions. I believe one in November and one in December. So we welcome you. We would love to hear your perspectives and being involved in that. So please join us for that. And without further ado, we are going to close out in prayer. So if the Reverend Dr. Denise Struthers is on the dare sheet is, let me just say really quickly, Reverend Dr. Denise Struthers, she is the National Director of Operations at Healing Communities, which was founded by founded and led by Dr. Harold Truleer, who was one of my professors, incredible messenger in my life. And they both work hand in hand together as co-laborers. And also Reverend Struthers is a member of the board on the Center for Public Justice. She's also an advocate regarding bringing these conversations, especially around sex trafficking and child pornography and all of these things to the forefront in church. She's also a singer. And she's all over YouTube. This is an amazing woman of God. So without further ado, Reverend Dr. Struthers, would you please close us out in prayer so that we can be released and go on and continue doing the work?
Yes. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for the lives of everyone that is represented here. Thank you for the community organizations represented, the faith-based organizations, the government organizations. God, I pray that there will be a fresh wind and a fresh anointing upon the works of their hands. I pray, God, that you will bless it and that you will anoint it. We ask, oh God, Lord, for your continued wisdoms and strategies and plans in this hour. We know that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, rulers of darkness and spiritual wickedness in high places. God, Lord, give us the strength and the stamina, oh Lord God, to stand up against the system that refuses to bend, the system that destroys our communities, that is against our Black and brown boys and girls, and just the system, oh God, that works to just keep us enslaved, Lord God, but you have given to us freedom, you have given to us victory. And so, God, we continue to stand in it. Thank you for CPJ that is constantly working to educate and to make our communities aware and to even stand on Capitol Hill and to declare your name and your work in this hour, oh God. We give you praise. I'm praying, God, that you would just give everyone the resources that they need, people resources, financial resources, God, that they may be effective in the work that they're doing. Open doors that have been shut to them, oh God. Lord, cause people to come from the north, south, east, and west to get behind and to push these God-given ministries and opportunities to help our young people. God, I'm praying that each of us will have prayer groups that will come together and that will saturate these organizations and this work in prayer. God, Lord, for we know that it's not by might, that it's not by anything that we can engineer, but it is by your spirit, God. And so we're constantly crying out to you for your divine intervention right there in the midst of it. We give you all the glory and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.